Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 1st meeting of the Planning Zoning Advisory Board. We'll start with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you can stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, members. Want to do the roll call, please?
Yes. Member Altabe?
Here.
Member Collins?
Here.
Member Dominguez? Member Dominguez?
Here.
Member Gersten? Member Parrish? Member Parrish?
Can't hear you, Member Parrish. I still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
If you can, you should know that you are still not on TV. My wife is trying to watch the TV and it is not on the screen. So you have not unmuted the says hearing board silent. So we've started the meeting with nobody knowing we've started it. You may have to do the Pledge of Allegiance over again.
Stand by for 1 second and speak with communications.
Yeah, let's confirm because there may just be a lag, a real-time lag, but let's confirm.
Hello.
It's up now.
Scientists
Okay, so there was a lag. Amber, do you think we need to redo the beginning?
droplets that can carry the virus travel with no covering.
I can't hear you.
Did the beginning of the meeting broadcast?
Yes, at broadcast, there is usually a lag between
Okay.
Member Vidal?
Present.
Member Ziegler? Member Ziegler?
Can't hear you, Mr. Ziegler. Can't hear you.
Hello? You hear me?
Yes.
No, we can.
Vice Chair Torrance?
Here.
Chair Gavalia?
Here.
And we have a new board member, Mr. Arthur Caruso.
Here.
Welcome.
We
Thank
have
you so
form.
much.
Do we have any requests, any absentees waivers?
Yes, I do have one request from Member Gersten.
Is there a motion from Mr. Vadillo, second by the vice chair? All
Yes.
those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Do you want me to read my statement of the chair now?
Well, sure, yes.
All right, the city has asked me to read this in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Executive Order Number 2069 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis, as extended by Executive Order Number 20-150 on June 23rd, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members physically present or at any specific location, and by utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided by Section 120.545 B2 Florida statutes. As such, the members of the Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board are appearing remotely for this meeting. Procedures for the public comment will be explained by the assistant attorney.
Thank you, Chair. I will provide the procedures for this virtual meeting. Any person who is a lobbyist pursuant to Chapter 2, Article 6 of the City Code must register with the City Clerk and comply with related city requirements for lobbyists before appearing before the Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board. A person may not lobby as city official, board member, or staff member until registering. A copy of the code section about lobbyists is available in the City Clerk's office or online at www.municode.com. Any person making a presentation, formal request, or petition to the board concerning real property must make the disclosures required by the City Code in writing. A copy of the City Code section is available at the office of the City Clerk or online at www.municode.com. The agenda and the materials for each item on the agenda for this virtual meeting was published and made available to the board in advance of the meeting. The materials for each item on the agenda are available during business hours at the City Clerk's office and online 24 hours a day at www.miamigov.com. Any person may be heard by the board through the chair and pursuant to the published notice for not more than 2 minutes on any proposition before the board, unless modified by the chair. Since this is a virtual meeting as authorized by the governor of the state of Florida, members of the public wishing to provide public comment can do so by uploading a pre-recorded video or voice message, pre-record or pre-register for a callback to provide live public comment, or submit public comment via the city's public comment form. I will provide more details in a moment regarding these public comment options, and more details can also be found by visiting www.miamigov.com/virtual-boards. All comments submitted will be included as part of the public record for this virtual meeting and will be considered by the board prior to taking any action. The city will accommodate any speakers desiring to appear in person, subject to all applicable emergency measures in place to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. Speakers who appear in person at City Hall will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19. Any person exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall. All interested parties are required to abide by all state, county, and local emergency orders and are urged to remain at home and practice social distancing. If the proposition is being continued or the opportunity to be heard, maybe at such later date before the board acts on such proposition. When addressing the board, the member of the public must first state his or her name, his or her address, and what item will be spoken about. When the board takes action or votes on any proposition before it, it shall do so by a roll call vote to be recorded and included in the record. Anyone wishing to appeal any decision made by the board for any matter considered at this meeting may need a verbatim record of the item. A video of this meeting may be requested at the Office of Communications or viewed online at www.miamigov.com. Please silence all cell phones and other noise-making devices. Any person with a disability requiring assistance, aids, and services for this meeting may notify Hearing Board's liaison. Please note that board members may have generally been briefed by city staff on items on today's agenda. PZ items shall proceed according to Section 7.1.4 of the Miami 21 zoning ordinance as temporarily modified ordinance numbers 13902 and 13903. Pursuant to emergency ordinance number 13903, parties for any PZ items, including any applicant, appellant, appellee, city staff, and any person recognized by the decision-making body as a qualified intervener, as well as the applicant's representatives, any experts testifying on behalf of the applicant, appellant, or appellee, may either be physically present at City Hall to be sworn in by oath or affirmation and make arrangements with hearing boards to do so, or may appear virtually and make arrangements to be sworn in by oath or affirmation in person at their location by an individual qualified to perform such duty. Pursuant to this emergency ordinance, members of the public who are not parties to an action pending before the board are not required to be sworn in by oath or affirmation. The members of the board shall disclose any ex parte communications to remove the presumption of prejudice pursuant to Florida statute section 286.0115 and section 7.1.4.5 of the Miami 21 zoning ordinance. Staff will then briefly present each item to be heard. For applications requiring board approval or recommendation, the applicant will then present its application or request to the board. If the applicant agrees with the staff recommendation, the board may proceed to its deliberation and decision. The applicant may also waive the right to any evidentiary hearing on the record. The order of presentation shall be set forth in the Miami 21 Code and in the City Code, providing that the applicant shall present first. For appeals, the appellant will present its appeal to the board, followed by the appellee. Staff will be allowed to make any recommendation they have. The city requires anyone requesting action by the board to disclose before the hearing anything provided to anyone for agreement to support or withhold objection to the requested action pursuant to City Code Section 2-8. In regard to access to the meeting, the city is using Zoom to hold its July 1st, 2020 virtual Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board meeting. Zoom is a cloud platform for video and audio conferencing, collaboration, chat, and webinars across mobile devices, desktops, telephones, and room systems. In order to ensure that the public has the ability to view the meeting, the city's communication department will broadcast the meeting through all the usual channels and avenues that are provided when a Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board meeting is held fully at City Hall. The meeting can be viewed live on Miami TV, which is miamigov.com/TV, and on Comcast Channel 77 for residents within the city. It will also be broadcast on YouTube. The broadcast will have closed captioning. Additionally, the city has not selected a virtual platform that requires the public to purchase or download any additional software or equipment to watch this meeting. Aside from the Zoom platform and that the participants will be appearing remotely, the public will have no discernible difference in their ability to watch the meeting. In regard to public comment, the city has developed several new methods of ensuring public comment for a virtual meeting. It has established 4 new options. The first new option allows the public to provide public comments via the city's dedicated public comment voicemail by calling 305-250-5351, where individuals can leave a 2-minute message that will be played during the virtual board meeting. The second new option allows for the public to submit a 2-minute video to be played during the virtual meeting. The third new option allows the public to submit comments via the city's online comment form. The comments submitted through the comment form were distributed to the board members and city administration throughout the day so that the board members can consider them prior to taking any action. Additionally, the online comment form will remain open during the meeting to accept new comments and distribute to the boards up until the chair closes public comment. The fourth new option allows the public to pre-register by calling 305-250-5350 to provide live public comment by phone during the virtual board meeting. For all of these 4 new options, all the comments received will be included in the public record of this meeting. The city also created a simple set of instructions explaining how the public may submit their comments with any option. Those instructions were provided in the notice to the public and published online at miamigov.com/virtualboards. Additionally, like any other Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board meeting, the public may provide public comment at City Hall. The city set up a terminal in the event members of the public travel to City Hall to provide public comment. However, due to COVID-19, all speakers desiring to appear in person will be subject to all applicable emergency measures in place to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. Speakers who appear in person will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19. Any person exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall, but will be able to participate through the other remote options described above. These 5 public comment options established and provided for the virtual Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board comply with Section 286.0114 and Section 120.54 of the Florida statutes. The city published an agenda as well as included in the notice to the public pursuant to City Code the items and the topics that will be discussed at today's virtual Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board meeting. Additionally, the public has been given the opportunity to provide public comment during the meeting, which is either at City Hall or the online public comment form, and within a reasonable proximity in time before and during the meeting via the public comment voicemail, online public comment form, and the public comment video upload, as well as the live public comment by phone. Moreover, Section 286.0114, subsection 4C of the Florida statute specifically authorizes the city to prescribe procedures or forms for an individual to use in order to inform the board or commission of a desire to be heard, to indicate his or her support, opposition, or neutrality on a proposition. The city, through its 5 public comment options, has provided 5 different procedures and forms to indicate, among other things, his or her support, opposition, or neutrality on the items and topics to be discussed at this virtual board meeting. The city provided information on how to submit comments in the notice to the public and on a dedicated webpage. Board members, are you comfortable with the notice provisions set forth and these uniform rules of procedures we've established for this virtual meeting?
Yes.
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 All I have.
Thank you. Do we need to swear in any members of city staff?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Next.
Go ahead, Sergio. Sergio, wait 1 second. We need you unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Sergio, do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you are about to provide is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Is it?
That's everyone that we have to be sworn in. Everyone else submitted their affidavits, correct? Sue?
I'd say no.
Sue, you need to be sworn in? Oh, okay.
Ready?
Yes.
All right. So, you swear affirm the
Yeah.
Do you swear that the information you provide is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I do. I am expressed to believe after the office of city attorney, and I am a notary public.
Thank you. Is that everyone?
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, Chair.
All right. Do we have any minutes that need to be taken care of?
No, we do not have any minutes. Would you like to acknowledge the alternate member as voting?
Do we have an alternative member?
Yes, that is member, I'm going to say your name wrong, Porosov. He is an alternate member.
All right. Again, welcome to the board. I'm acknowledging Mr. Porosov as a full voting member tonight, as his capacity warrants, because we don't have a full board. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, would you like to open public comment?
Yes. Do we have a first round of public comment, please?
Yes, we do have someone at the podium.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm here as part of the public comment today. I'm Iris Escar with offices at 333 Southeast 2nd Avenue. I'm here on behalf of PZ5. It's a text amendment. We wanted to introduce into the record 17 letters of support from property owners, which encompass 54 properties within the Comer Station area. We're very appreciative of the city's efforts to create zoning text changes to incentivize development for office in this area. We're located just south of the health district, and we appreciate the city's efforts in coordinating with all the neighbors and property owners that have been working on this for a long, long time. So we just wanted to make sure that was included in the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please forward, and I would forward them to the chair and the board.
Thank you. Do we have any pre-recorded or written comments that need to be sent our way?
Okay, so no one registered for a callback. There is one public comment to play back, and we're gonna play that back right now.
Please stand by.
Liliana Trzynski, 3751 Southwest 29th Street. The item is 7434, the approval of the ordinance for 2824 and 2828 Southwest 37th Avenue. The first thing I have to say is that the pictures that you show are impossible to read. I've taken multiple photos of it and I cannot decide for the location. I know where it's at based on the address because I drove by it. However, one thing I want to point out to you is that all this is going to impact the traffic on 28th Street, 37th Court, 38th Avenue, and 29th Street, 37th Court, 38th Avenue. Anybody that is conducting business or coming on 37th Avenue and 28th Street usually cuts around. They do not go to Bird Road to make their right turn or whatever it is. They cut around the neighborhood. There are four-way stops. There doesn't seem to be any kind of enforcement. There's a lot of traffic coming through the side street on the residential areas. So please take a look at the traffic that this is going to generate. Not really sure what this project is about, and I am not able, due to my age and respiratory conditions, to attend the meeting, but thank you for listening.
And Chair, that completes the playback portion. No online public comment form was submitted. However, that option remains available until you close public comment.
All right, so let's go ahead and read the first two items. I believe they're a companion.
PZAB item 1, file ID 7433, a resolution of the Miami Planning, Zoning and Appeals Board with attachment recommending approval of an ordinance to the Miami City Commission amending ordinance number 10544 as amended, the future land use map of the Miami Comprehensive Neighborhood Plan pursuant to small scale amendment procedures subject to Statute 163-3187 Florida statutes by changing the future land use designation from low density restricted commercial to medium density restricted commercial of the acreage described herein of the real properties at 2824 and 2828 Southwest 37th Avenue, Miami, Florida, as more particularly described in Exhibit A, making findings containing a severability clause and providing for an effective date. PZAB item 2, file ID 7434, a resolution of the Miami Planning, Zoning Appeals Board with attachments recommending approval of an ordinance to the Miami City Commission amending the zoning atlas of the ordinance number 13114 as amended by changing the zoning classification from T4L, General Urban Transect Zones Limited, to T5-0, Urban Center Transect Zone Open of the properties located at approximately 2824 and 2828 Southwest 37th Avenue, Miami, Florida, as more particularly described in the attached and incorporated Exhibit A, further recommending to the City Commission acceptance of the voluntary proffered covenant attached and incorporated herein as Exhibit B, making findings containing a severability clause and providing for an effective date.
I wanted to open up all the way.
Okay, City?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're a little low, Sergio.
Speak a little louder, Sergio.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen to make the presentation.
Can you speak a little louder, Sergio?
I'm going to share my screen to start my presentation. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Can you see it now?
No, sir.
Okay, it's starting. Okay.
Sure.
Good, we see it. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Sergio Garrido for the records. The cases in front of you are 7433 and 7434, requesting a future land use amendment and rezoning of the properties located in 2824 and 2828 Southwest 37th Avenue. On your screen, you have the aerial of the properties located in the Southwest 37th Avenue, close to the Douglas Park. The request, as stated, is to take the properties, the future land use from low density restricted commercial to medium density restricted commercial, and the zoning designation from T4L to T50. The properties have 16,628 square feet total. On your screen, the representation of the future land use amendment requested, and this is the request of the rezoning. It is to note that as a background of the request, that the 5 properties north on the subject properties were granted with the FLOM amendment from low density restricted commercial to medium density restricted commercial, and also with the rezoning from T4L to T50. These 5 properties belongs to the same owner of the subject properties. This is an aerial depicting the location of the subject properties and the closeness to the Douglas Road Metro Rail station. The uses that will be introduced in the area are some lodging and commercial uses, and also some educational uses by warrant and by right. In the analysis, the property, the request, rezoning and future land use passes the school concurrency, also the recreation and open space, potable water, sanitary sewer, solid waste collection, and transportation. It is to note that the analysis also found consistency with the policy LU 169 that states that the city land development regulation will establish mechanisms to mitigate the potentially adverse impact on the development on existing neighborhoods. Also with policy LU 1315 that states that the city will continue to encourage development patterns that enhance existing neighborhoods by developing a balanced mixed use, including areas, employment, shopping, housing, and recreation in close proximity to each other. Also is consistent with the policy LU 1110 that states that the city land development regulation will encourage high-density residential developments and redevelopments near to Metro Rail and Metro Mover station, which complies with the location of the properties. And also with section 7128F2 from the Miami 21 code that says that the change may be made only to the next intensity transit zone, which is the request exactly to comply with this section. Also with section 7128 that states that the need and justification for the proposed change, including changed or changing conditions that make the passage of the proposed change necessary. On this regard, the background explained make a changing situation in the area that supports the request. As recommendation, Staff find based on the finding of staff's analysis for both applications, the planning department recommends for the subject properties approval of the proposed comprehensive plan amendment to amend the designation future land use map from low density restricted commercial to medium density restricted commercial. As well, recommends approval of the requested zoning change from T4L to T50. For your consideration, we have to let you know that the applicant proffered a voluntary covenant on which the owner shall provide a total of 1 unit as part of a multifamily residential rental or condominium development on the property to serve the segment at or below 80% of AMI. Alternatively, the owner shall contribute with $10,000 of a lump sum payment to the public trust fund, to the public benefit trust fund prior to obtaining any building permit. This condition applies only to residential and multi-housing development. It is to note that staff cannot consider covenant as part of the analysis and recommendation, but this is for you, for the board to take in consideration for your final decision. That way concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to the applicant, please.
Mr. Fernandez?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm Ben Fernandez. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant. And my business address is 200 South Biscayne Boulevard. The staff recommendation, we believe, is correct in this case. This is an area that has experienced recent rezonings, and what I'd like to do is walk you through some photos. I'm going to share my screen.
So let me, if I could just pause you 1 second. There's no swearing in needed by him?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there is. And we have it over here.
Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Okay. Can you all see that?
Not yet.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it has.
Okay, it's starting.
Now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So, as Mr. Garrido was indicating, this property is uniquely situated between Douglas Park and the Douglas Station, Metro Rail station. The existing conditions on Douglas Road are really sort of a throwback to the 40s and 60s when many of these duplexes were developed and the street was a much less intense thoroughfare than it is today. Fast forward to today, and the thoroughfares are much more important, and they combine with mass transit in the area, which means that it becomes a transit-oriented development. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. What's important to know also is that the City Commission in late 2018 approved a rezoning of the properties immediately to the north of this, between the T68, the red that you see on this map, and the subject property, which are the two lots below the T50. We're talking about only 16,628 square feet, and the proposed rezoning would change those lots to T50 to match essentially the rezoning that was approved by the commission a year and a half ago. The area is a transit-oriented development, which comprises approximately a half-mile circumference from the Douglas station. And the reason that's important is because the way they derive, or the planning department derives, or I should say the Miami 21 code defines the transit-oriented development, is by looking at what is a reasonable walk to the station. And that is the term, that's where the term pedestrian shed comes from. And we are located within what is the pedestrian shed, less than a half mile from the Douglas station. This is the map from diagram 11, article 4 of the Miami 21 code, and you'll see the property highlighted in red. You can see that it is a walk down 37th Avenue. It's not the shortest walk, but it certainly gets you there relatively within a few minutes, I would say. What the comprehensive plan says about areas that are in properties that are within transit-oriented development areas is that the city should encourage high-density residential development close to them because they're close to Metro Rail or Metro Mover stations. So we believe that our application is consistent and furthers, consistent with the comprehensive plan and furthers the policies, the very important policy of the comprehensive plan. Now, you heard earlier from one resident that described traffic in the area. Absolutely. You know, traffic is, of course, ubiquitous in our city, except for now, which I'm sure everybody's enjoying the brief reprise that we're having from the traffic that we normally experience. But the fact is that the only way that we're going to move away from some of those traffic congestion problems, or at a minimum from making them worse, is by doing the right thing and bringing residential density closer to the stations. What has happened historically in the city of Miami is that, of course, they built the Metro Rail, but they didn't take it anywhere where there were pockets of residential density. The county was at the forefront of creating downtown Kendall and increasing density there. The city has been a little bit slow to respond to that, trying to catch up. 27th Avenue is seeing some station area development. But the problem is that all of US 1 was a railroad corridor in the past, and many of these stops were industrial in character. 27th Avenue has a lumber store, Shell Lumber, and surrounded by industrial uses. The same with 37th Avenue. Until Merrick Park was developed, you had many industrial, you still have a lot of industrial uses around the Wassa substation, etc. So the reason was that the train would obviously bring materials to these areas, and they became more industrial than residential. But now we need them to become much more residential in order to facilitate the transportation that the train was designed to provide. In this case, this application is really not going to solve that problem overnight, because the density increase that we're describing is really only 11 units. The change from T4 to T5 would change the density from 36 units per acre to 65. But on a parcel of this size of 16,000 square feet, you're talking about a density increase of 11 units. So we think that's completely appropriate given the context. Again, we're sandwiched between the station and Douglas Park. I think it makes sense to bring T5 multifamily zoning close to our parks so that people can access the parks more easily, take a short walk to the park, etc. Also, I think it's interesting to note that if you look at the 27th Avenue station, the other transportation-oriented development in the area, you'll find that there's T50 zoning lining all of the station. That is the darker brown zoning that you see on this map here around that station. So what we're suggesting is that the same type of transitional zoning would be appropriate at this station. It certainly doesn't make sense to have low density residential next to or within your pedestrian shed of a transit oriented development. And further up 37th Avenue, I think one of the things that Mr. Garrido mentioned is appropriate for you to consider is the fact that there are changed circumstances. So this application meets the rezoning criteria from Article 7 in 3 different ways. It's furthering the policies of your comprehensive plan by bringing density closer to the station. It's recognizing that there have been changes in the area, and namely those changes are the residential development that has sprung up north and south of this property. To the north on 37th Avenue, you have Douglas Cove, Da Vinci on Douglas, and a no-name project with this sort of between them, but you can see by the scale of these are all 15 to 20 story projects. Just north of the park on 27th Street, you have about a 5-story office building. And then of course at Douglas Station, you have the platform project and you have the Adler and 13th floor developments that are both 20-story plus projects that are going to bring much more intense development to the very core of the station. What we're conceiving here is a 5-story, this is strictly a conceptual plan. We'd still have to go through an administrative process to obtain the approval for it, but we're considering a commercial liner along the ground floor and with residential units overlooking the park area and Douglas. Again, I think it makes sense to bring T50 closer to parks. That is something that you see in other parks in the city of Miami. For instance, Coral Gate Park has a T50 zoning abutting it on 32nd Avenue. Antonio Maceo Park on Northwest 7th Street is surrounded by T68, more intense than T50. Fern Isle Park on 22nd Avenue off of the expressway is surrounded by T50 in the dark brown zoning. And then Curtis Park, which is off of the river and 22nd Avenue, is also abuts a combination of T4 and T5 zoning. And these are, of course, parks that aren't proximate to metro rail stations. So we think that it's that much more appropriate to have the T5 zoning here on 37th Avenue. Stearns Park, which is off of the 36th Street Causeway, also abuts T5R. And then something else I wanted to add is not just the fact that this property is within a short walk from the Metro Rail station, but it's also along the Coconut Grove trolley line. The Coconut Grove trolley line comes up from Grand Avenue down or up Douglas Road, up to the park. You can see where it turns on 29th Street, comes back down 37th right in front of this property, and would drop you off, you know, if you chose to take the trolley, right at the station. So it is a very fortunate location for transit to the station. And then lastly, I just want to reiterate what Sergio said about our covenant. We are proffering a covenant to address the one comment in your zoning recommendation about the loss of naturally occurring affordable housing. Clearly, we understand that that's a problem in the city. But I think that the housing that exists along this particular thoroughfare is not the best type of affordable housing that we want to offer to our residents. Just the backup traffic condition that is created by having multiple cars parked in front of these duplexes. I'll take you back to the picture at the beginning. This is not a good situation on Douglas Road to have cars backing up into what is fast-moving traffic. I think it makes more sense to provide redevelopment that can be more consistent and potentially provide access off of a side street, as the Miami 21 code requires when you have a corner lot, such as this would become when it is combined with the T50 parcels to the north. So with that said, I'll close my comments. I think that we meet the test for rezoning described in Article 7, and we're furthering the policies of the comprehensive plan through this application. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And by the way, I'll just add that we did have supporters for this application when we submitted the rezoning for the parcels to the north a year and a half ago. Many of the lots in the area, though, are now owned by absentee landlords, and there really hasn't been a lot of response from the neighborhood to our application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll check with the clerk to see if there's any public comment awaiting.
No, earlier he said that it was just one person. I'm checking again right now just to make sure, but he said it was only one person at the podium. No.
All right, with that, we'll close the public comment and we'll bring it back to the board for comments. Anyone who has comments, just raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Mr. Ziegler. You got to unmute, Mr. Ziegler. Can't hear you, Mr. Ziegler.
You hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. The question to the applicant, what is directly behind it? Is that single family directly behind those townhouses and the duplexes?
It's a duplex zone behind the property. So they're duplex.
Yeah, on the next street, that would be what, single family or duplex?
Duplexes.
Duplex, okay. Okay. That's it.
Mr. Parrish.
First questions for staff. Sergio, what is the maximum height in the duplex zone abutting this property? What is the maximum height of the buildings that can be there?
Sergio? Go ahead.
Okay, it's 40 feet, the maximum height.
I don't think that's correct in T3.
T3O.
T30.
Two-story.
Maybe. I mean, I'm sure Ben knows, I'm sure Mr. Fernandez knows the answer, but I was going to ask you.
I think it's 25 feet, Mr. Parrish.
That's what I think it is. Well, and in the T4, what is the maximum height for the T4?
I believe it's 39.
39, I think. 39 or what is that in floors?
It's 4 stories.
Four stories.
You're allowed 4 stories in the T4.
Yes, sir.
And in the T5, what is the maximum height and what is the maximum amount of stories?
5 stories, and you could probably approach about 80 feet.
80 feet.
With a mixed-use project. If it's just residential, it would be a little less.
Okay, and so, I know you gave a rendering of what you might be building there. What do you envision the height of that building going to be?
Well, you know, the fact is that less intense corridors than Douglas Road, or I'd say as intense, say, take Coral Way, for instance. It's predominantly, it was down zoned to T5, Coral Way. The original Miami 21 transect proposal was T68. And in fact, it is zoned T68 in some areas, but in other areas, it was down zoned at the request of some of the neighbors, but that down zoning was to T5. So T5, I would say, is very much compatible with, you know, surrounding residential development, both duplex and single family, because
Okay,
it's fine
all right.
all those neighborhoods.
All right, well, the point I'm getting at is, it's something that's bothered me a lot on, since I've been on this board, is that my reading of Miami 21, forget the TOD sections that have been added for right now, but my reading of Miami 21 is it's supposed to be, as you pointed out, progression from one step at a time, T3 to T4 to T5, because of the height differentiation between those categories. So one of the things that we've come in problems with in this over and over is having T5 next to T3, so that you can have a 50 or even 80-story building, 80 foot high building, 5 stories, maybe even 6, right next to a 2-story building, which would be 25 feet. And that disparity means that you have the person who's immediately behind the T5 in that T3 zoning is faced with the blank wall. They don't get sunlight, air, or anything because they're parked right behind it. And that's why it seems like always, reading the succession rules, that if you're going to go up zone a property to from T3 to T4 to T5, that the properties immediately behind it should at least get the economic benefit of being rezoned to T4, even though they still may have duplex on them. And that's just something that is in the Miami 21 code, that succession rules that are set forth very concisely is supposed to deal with. But Miami changes, and so one of the things that's happened is, and you're very well aware of this, as everybody is, that there's supposed to be a review of Miami 21 to deal with situations like this, where you end up having, again, admittedly, this may be a very good area to have higher intensity density, but what are you going to do about the height and the adverse effect it has on the immediately adjacent neighborhood? And of course, that has been a big concern of mine and of the board for so many of these projects that come in that seem desirable from a walkability to transit stations and the parks, which you've made an excellent case for, but at the same time, intrusive and actually a negative impact on the neighboring, on the neighbors who are much less intensity zoning. And this is supposed to be resolved by reviews of Miami 21, so that we can have more T4 and have this buffer between T5 and T3. So that's a long way of going around saying, you've made an excellent you've made an excellent presentation of this particular site, perhaps being suitable for much higher density, but it still doesn't resolve this issue of what are you going to do about a 50 to 80 foot high building right next to a 25 foot high building. And that is what really ticks off the neighbors. They think it's abusive to their neighborhoods. So I'll wait to hear what other members of the board have to say about this. I do think it was one other question for Sergio Garrido. When I read the board package, there was one of the policies that was problematic. I mean, you said all 10 or so of the policies except one supported this project, but there was one that you said that was problematic. Which was that? Could you read that one, please?
Thank you.
It said one was problematic or a mixed bag, I think was the word that whoever wrote it described it. and it wasn't in your presentation to the board.
I read policy LU 169.
Which is the one that says
the
it's a
city
mixed
land development
bag?
regulation will establish it's a mix.
The reviewer said it is a mixed bag. One of those policies, and it takes me too long to pull it up on my own screen because the package is so huge.
The chair? Hello?
Go ahead.
Audible. Hi. I just want to be able to assist Sergio with this because I know for the future land use map amendment, there was only one finding of inconsistency. And that came from the housing element. And that was a finding that was arrived at after planning staff's analysis of sociodemographics through the census. And it was based on findings. I'm just bear with me as I'm just pulling this out, but it's a policy that's enumerated HO-1.1.3, which states that the city will continue to develop comprehensive neighborhood redevelopment plans and programs that encourage private developers to develop new or rehabilitate old residential structures and ensure that public investments are coordinated with private sector developments to increase the overall attractiveness of redeveloping neighborhoods. We were sort of taking that to sort of speak to the existence of naturally occurring affordable housing. And that was the grounds for that inconsistency.
All right, yeah, okay, that brings it back to mind. Which then, I know we're not, the planner, Sergio, did not consider the covenant that's being proffered. And I guess neither should we consider it, other than it's an indication that the units that are going to be replaced need to be redeveloped. But right now they do comprise affordable housing units. And this, when combined with the other lots that this owner has, they can do a fairly substantial 5-story building, which is a considerable upgrade over what could be built there now. And they've proffered $10,000 or one affordable unit. So I think that is, to me at least, a recognition that there are other considerations of the effect that this is going to have on some of the residents of this existing residents of this neighborhood who may be displaced, which we see all the time with developments like this. Other people move in, and then you have to weigh whether the new development outweighs the hard effects on some of the existing neighbors. But that's a balance. It's a huge thing that this board has been concerned. I've been concerned with, and this board has been concerned with ever since I've been on it. So I'll let other board members comment, but I do have some problems with extending T5 zoning where it does not exist now further down the track, even though it's on 37th Avenue, a major road, adjacent to T3 zoned neighborhood. I have a problem with that. Not insurmountable, but I want to hear about it.
May I respond to that, Mr. Parrish?
Sure.
Oh, so they're certainly valid points, and everybody's struggling with these problems, but you have to weigh the other policies in your comprehensive plan. I mean, the fact is, this is closer to the Metro Rail station than the T5 zoning that is to the north on the very same street. And it's one thing to say that you need to really consider whether or not a rezoning is appropriate because it's displacing affordable housing when it's not in a transit corridor. Because then clearly you don't have such a strong contravening policy to consider. But in a city like Miami that is changing as quickly as it is, with the major transportation problems that we encounter every day, anybody from out of town that drives down US 1 and looks at our transit stations will say, who planned this? How could we have had a Miami 21 exercise that continued to endorse industrial uses around our rail stations. It simply makes no sense, and it's a problem, a bigger problem than maintaining 4 or 6 affordable housing units on a property. The fact is, the parcels behind this should be rezoned to T4, and they should be redeveloped as well. And you should have increased density around this entire station.
So the only thing I would say to that is most of the pictures of the big developments that have happened are in the TOD down on US 1, which are not directly abutting. Some are abutting T3, but most of them are where they should be. This one's a little bit more debatable as to whether this will be of benefit or not. It's not immediately adjacent to the transit station. A half mile is still a long way to walk in the Ped Shed in Miami's heat. So, no, wait, hold on just for a second. So what I'm saying is that Miami 21 has been acknowledged even by our city commission as long overdue for a review. It was supposed to be happening every 2 or 3 years, to my understanding, and it's never happened yet in 10 years. So finally, it's beginning to happen. In fact, Ms. Ketterer is going to be, hopefully, don't let me forget to read the memo that that the board asked for at the last meeting. This is a problem, and I'm not sure that increasing the problem, like I don't want to say a Band-Aid, but continuing to build high-rise buildings or mid-rise buildings immediately adjacent to low neighborhood, 25-foot high neighborhoods should be continuing until we get this Miami 21 review, which needs to happen immediately, by the way. So it's all coming, the chickens are all coming to roost at the same time because we are growing, and you're right, the transit needs riders. This is in some ways a very ideal location, but it has some warts, Ben, no question about it in my mind anyway. So that's all for right now for me.
Mr. Eisenberg, I saw your hand up earlier. Did you have anything to come in, or are you okay?
Thank you very much for recognizing that. I just wanted to bring one minor clarification. The maximum height in T4 is 3 stories. It's not 4 stories.
Thank you. I thought that was the case. I didn't think it was 4 stories. It is 3 stories, which makes it even more egregious to not have a buffer between the T5 and the T3 neighborhood. And that is a huge problem with Miami 21 and many places of the city.
Thank you. Vice Chair, will you go ahead, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions and comments. The first one is for Sergio. On the concurrency analysis for the transportation on this item, the comment was that transportation needed more information to determine what the impact is under criteria 1. And then, and you read further into it later on in our agenda packet, it says that the transportation fails going north on 37th Avenue from that point. And I'm sure it's because there's a traffic light there right near the park. And the number of trips cited is in a 24-hour period is 1,700 coming out of a building, a 5-story building, 1,700 per day. And it just seems like that's a boondoggle. And so I really think that for the city to say, for staff to say that all the criteria in the analysis were met, I think that transportation report really is, it does not meet the criteria. And I was really surprised that the resulting comment from the city was that it was a yes. That's my first comment. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Sergio, before I move on.
I will defer to the chief of compliance, to Sue.
Hi, I'm happy to comment on that. So when we do our analysis, we have to do it within the parameters that are established in the comprehensive plan, and the concurrency and analysis methodologies that we have in the comp plan have put that in such a way that it's a testing. And so we don't have a way to prevent, to create an inconsistent finding. Furthermore, the city of Miami is a transportation concurrency exception area. So based off that, we basically allow for a finding of consistency, and the analyst who provides these findings further states that when the project comes forward, that mitigation options would be, basically deliberated at that time. That's the basis for the analysis.
Okay. How many people live on these properties now, Mr. Fernandez?
Well, there are two, I can't speak to the number of people, but there are two duplexes. So,
So
yeah.
four?
4 families, correct.
4 families. And in the building that you propose, if you were to get T5, for each of the lots that you're asking for rezoning, you would allocate in your covenant 1 unit, or only 1 unit out of the whole building would be for low income?
It's just these lots. The other
1 for each lot. What the equivalent of 1 for each lot?
1 for these 4 families. For the 2 lots combined that you're considering today. The other
family,
yes.
1 unit. And did you offer that same covenant when we did the, I don't recall, when we did the zoning change on the other properties?
Yes.
Was that yes?
Yes.
So what would be the total, the number of units that would be provided if you were to build under a T5?
Would be 3.
Okay. I guess my next question is for staff, my final question. And that is, if we were to grant this T5 tonight, how long before the applicant could come back, maybe sacrificing one of the southernmost lot, let's say, and come back and want all the others to be T6? Because it abuts T6 to the north. And if he had a T5 on the south, could he take the other 6 properties and then come back and ask for a rezone to a T6-8? And if so, in what time frame? That was for you, Sergio. Thank you.
Yes, that will be 18 months since the last rezoning, but it requires a whole new analysis and a whole new set of evidence and demonstration that the request is the appropriate to the area. At this moment, we have no clue about the applicant trying to go to T6 or to rezoning any other property in the vicinity.
Thank you. Those are my only questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Fernandez, at least in your conceptual plan, did I notice or hear commercial on the first floor?
It's a possibility. Yeah, the thought of some sort of neighborhood serving commercial is a possibility, but it's not certain yet. The plan has not been, fully fleshed out.
So,
and of course, times are also changing considerably. So commercial is a big question mark given, the changes that are happening with commercial leasing.
I'm very sensitive to Douglas. Coral Gate, north of Coral Way, we're running into the same concern with single family along Douglas and what's going to happen to those properties eventually. So echoing Mr. Parrish's comment that it seems like a big height between your backyard neighbors and Douglas Road, which is really causing me to pause. I'm okay with the higher density of residential. It's just that the height differences seems a little stark, and that's kind of what the neighbors woke up to on 27th Avenue when some of these projects were built, and then they saw, wow, that's a pretty darn big building got built behind.
Mr. Chair, I beg to differ with you. On 27th Avenue, those projects were developed under C1, and they're 20-story, 15 to 20-story buildings. That's 3 times the size of these buildings.
Understood, but but that kind of woke up the neighborhood.
Well, and I also note that, you know, your own planning recommendation describes the fact that this is an area of study and that they are considering rezoning the entire corridor to the station, T5.
Right.
So,
but that again, that's not before. So I'd like to just go back to Sergio. In your review, it included the commercial aspect of the zoning. So you're not looking at a specific project, but adding commercial to where there is no commercial still aligns with the Miami 21. I feel like Mr. Parrish here for a second of supporting our neighborhoods and really encouraging the characteristics of the neighborhood.
The commercial is allowed today.
This is to Sergio.
Yes. The corridor accepts higher intensity along the corridors to prevent the traffic to be distributed to the residential areas. That's why the intensity and the highest density and intensity is proposed to the corridors and concentrated in the TOD areas. Basically, that's the intent, to contain the traffic and not to spread into the.
Oh no, I get that, but the current use is residential, certainly multifamily residential. The new use is going to introduce commercial into an area that doesn't have it. It may be zoned for it, but it's not there today. So you're saying that supports Miami 21's vision of protecting neighborhoods.
T4L allows some commercial of course, in less intensity than what is allowed by T50, but it's not merely residential.
No, I get the zoning and what's allowed, but I'm just saying what's used today it's not commercial.
That is correct.
And I'm just saying, how does that come into play when you start reviewing the impact of a project or a rezoning on the surrounding neighborhood? And to me, the surrounding neighborhood is kind of what's behind that property.
Yes, at this moment, we did not consider any project. No project was provided as part of the application, nor any intention of create other, but residential. And from the residential component, condominium or apartments, the applicant voluntarily proffered a covenant to be considered by the board. But in any moment, it was provided a project nor a site plan.
And then one final comment from Mr. Fernandez. I lost you on my screen. There you are. Is the $10,000 a requirement? I mean, why couldn't you just give the $10,000 to the park for a park improvement since it's the neighborhood? Or is that...
Yeah, and let me just say that the character of this roadway within a block radius is not necessarily residential. There are medical office buildings.
Okay, I didn't ask that question. I asked about
buildings. There's a school across the street, two schools.
Right. So the $10,000 is a city requirement to go to that trust, or do you have the option?
It's a voluntary proffer.
Could you voluntarily proffer it to the park?
Absolutely.
So it's not a city rule. Okay. I'm looking for the next hand up. All right. Mr. Altabe.
Yeah, just a quick question to Mr. Fernandez. How many units would you estimate that can be built if this project is approved to T5?
It is a total of 24 units, and the increase as a result of the zoning change would be an increase of 11 units over the 13 that are allowed today.
So a total of 35. Okay.
Mr. Ziegler, I saw your hand up. Aaron, I saw your hand up. You go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I always want to get on the Mr. Parrish point about which is based on what my question was for about asking what's directly behind it. But, and I understand your concern, and that was my concern also, but I don't really see how we're going to solve this problem. I think the idea of what he wants to do as far as putting more intensity is great. The question is, how do you solve the problem with the neighbors? I'm just commenting on as far as how do we sort of solve that problem. You got this issue with, it's a good use, but you know, the impact on their neighborhood may be adverse, at least the way it stands now. Now, if it was a matter of him rezoning the entire thing T4, or at least the ones in the back, we might have less of an issue. But I mean, as far as solving our problem, as far as the housing and the other things, I don't see, unless we sort of start somewhere. I'm not saying that this is the ideal way to start, but I don't see how we're going to be able to get to a point which is basically have more concentrated housing around Metro Rail Station, around transportation corridors, so to say, and you know, the issue with the traffic. So that was just my comment, you know, on what you said. I think the point is good, but I got the same concerns, but I don't know exactly how to address it unless the city makes a requirement when you do things like this on 37th Avenue. Since you see this is probably going to come in the future, listen, you need to talk to the neighbors and see, can you do the whole thing? We'll do this T5 and do that backwards T4. So that's just my suggestion.
I'll recognize Mr. Dominguez, followed by Mr. Porosov.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that area. Actually, I went to school at Gables High School, so I drove by there all the time. Since I've been driving by there, for whatever reason, 37th Avenue, compared to 22nd, 27, and Lejeune, doesn't have a lot of traffic at all. And if you look at some of those bigger buildings they've built in the past, near Coral Gables Hospital that Mr. Fernandez showed, you could barely even think that anybody even lived in those buildings because there's not a lot of traffic. And considering the hospitals there as well, I'm actually surprised every time I get on 37th Avenue that it's a straight shot up to Berg Road. So I'm not that concerned about the traffic. And if Mr. Fernandez can put that picture up of that duplex with the cars parked up in front, that's when I drive by there, that's what I see all the time, which doesn't let anybody walk on the sidewalk. You got people backing up into 37th Avenue. And to be quite frank with you, it's those duplexes that are there are an eyesore because they haven't really been kept up to standards. And look at the way the white car is parked. That's all the way down 37th Avenue. That's a huge problem in that area. So I would welcome a little bit of an improvement aesthetically to the neighborhood. And the fact that they won't be backing into traffic or backing onto 37th Avenue would be a huge help. And if we could fix that all the way down 37th Avenue, I think that would be a nice improvement. You got a lot of ways to get to the station, and walking around those things are dangerous. And those guys are parked like that all the way down that street. So I don't have a problem with the project. I don't think it's that big. I mean, there's a net 11, so it's not going to be like we're going to have tons of new people in the neighborhood driving cars. So, I mean, I'd support the project in its present form right now. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, going to Mr. Porosov. You're on. We can't hear you, sir.
I guess the biggest thing I see here, I recognize that the 5 lots to the north, it's the same ownership as the 2 lots to the south. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So essentially, it's an assemblage. They're going to put all 7. So even though there's a net 11 additional units or 13 additional units, really the idea is that they're going to put a project there. That's what appears. And that happens to be a phenomenal location for that. It's 13. There's actually 13 houses between that last house and the corner of Bird Avenue and 37th, which is electrical facility. So the idea of the 37th Avenue and to put up a structure there is phenomenal, just like you're seeing it happening on Bird Avenue. I think the biggest challenge here that we're seeing is that then you have the T30 behind it, which is really the challenge is you live in a house and behind you have a 5-story. But it's a perfect plan. It's just a shame that the houses behind are T3, but they're able to put up a nice structure that there's a big benefit in housing, in that area near the Metro Rail. So I guess the sacrifices, you have, seven houses behind, but then you have a lot more upside in providing housing for the community. So it's a toss up. In my opinion,
can I chime in really quick? And just from a property value perspective, I think the property values may probably go up if you beautify the area a little bit. So I don't think it's that much of a 100% negative for the people that are behind it.
Mr. Dominguez, would you like to pop for a motion?
Hold on, please. Not yet on the motion, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Parrish.
I'll be brief, since I said most. Just one thing I wanted to follow up on the vice chair's comment. They're supposed to wait 18 months to go from T5 to T6. And I'm not Ben, Mr. Fernandez, I'm not saying that's what your client is intended to do, but we've seen it before where developers apply, then say, well, I can get to the commission. The commission has the right, you correct me if I'm wrong, Sue Trone, to waive the 18 months. And we've seen that before. So within 2 years, probably less than a year, we could see, and again, not saying that Mr. Fernandez's client's going to do this, a T6 building, which would then be up to 80 feet right next to the duplexes behind it. And the only thing I can say in answer to, and I understand this is on its face, it's a very good project and arguably the right place. But imagine if you were one of those duplex owners directly behind this building, and the city is just saying, well, tough luck, you've lost in the great real estate lottery. You're not going to be T4, and you're stuck with T3. Your property value has gone down. You can't go in your backyard because it's butt up against a 50 or 80 foot high building. It's a matter of justice for those people. And it's easy to say for us, maybe not so easy to say that that's life, but there's something wrong that at the very least, the owners of those properties should have their property upzoned to T4 automatically. Maybe that will be one of the changes that comes to Miami 21. But you can't continue to do this lottery game where some people are big winners and some people are big losers just because of what this board and what the city commission decides to do. That may be life, but I'm not happy with it.
All right, so I think we've had some good discussion. I'll take it back to Mr. Dominguez. I offered you a moment ago.
Yeah.
If you want.
But I haven't gotten an answer on yet, Mr. Chair, on whether this particular property can go to T6 and skip the 18-month waiting period. We heard there's an 18-month waiting period, but not what are the requirements if somebody wants to skip that 18-month period.
City Attorney, can you address Mr. Parrish's question?
Yes, there is a provision in Miami 21 that provides for a waiver if approved by City Commission.
No, actually.
What's that?
So continue.
There is a provision in Miami 21 that permits the City Commission to waive that 18-month provision. There is a certain criteria. Unfortunately, my Miami 21 website isn't working, but I believe the criteria is something along the lines that it would provide an injustice or something along those lines. I don't know, Jacqueline, if you have that provision up, it's in Article 7, 7.1.2.8 towards the bottom, I believe.
I'm also having internet issues, but I did want to speak to this point. Typically, when an applicant comes in and they're looking to waive the 18 months, it's part of their application, and we bring that before this board, and it's also part of the analysis. So I understand the board's concern about the applicant possibly wishing to do that, but that's something we've had vetted in their application as part of this presentation. Again, bear with me. I'm having connectivity issues. I have my laptop and it's just not pulling up the information. Give me a moment.
Does that address enough, Mr. Parrish, your question?
It does.
Wait for the city to
It does.
connect
It's a
it.
process, but we've seen the process abused before.
Well, they'd have to come in front of us again if they wanted to do that anyway.
Mr.
And
Parrish,
we all-
Mr. Parrish, Mr. Parrish, I didn't hear you. Would you like us to wait for the city, or can we?
No. I've heard enough. And our fellow board members have seen this, and we know that the 18-month thing has been abused before, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's abused again. But I don't think in this case it will be. It's not likely to be. So this is a hard one. There's pluses and minuses for sure.
Yep.
So I'll wait for somebody else to make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Dominguez, please make your motion.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great benefit to the area. So I'd like to make a motion to approve PZAB 1 in its present form as presented.
All right, looking for a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Collins. So he's the first hand I saw. You can call the roll,
And
please.
Chair, I would remind the board that this does require a supermajority to recommend approval, which it appears there are 9 members here. So that would be 6 votes in the affirmative.
Remember when voting to unmute yourselves, and your video must be on. Member Dominguez,
Yes.
Member Collins,
Yes.
Member Altabe,
Yes.
Member Parrish,
No.
Member Vadil,
Yes.
Member Ziegler,
Yes.
Member Parasoff, I'm sorry,
You got to come off mute, sir. Sorry, I can't hear him.
Yeah, I said yes.
Okay.
It keeps on muting me, and then somebody magically creates a window, and I press unmute. It's the only way I can do it. But yes.
Vice Chair Torrance, ma'am?
No.
Chair Gavalia,
Yes.
motion passes 7-2. And that's for the land use. And how about the rezone?
Like to make a motion to approve the rezone?
And there's a second by.
Was the second?
Vadillo? All right, a second by Mr. Vadillo.
Okay. Member Dominguez,
Yes.
Member Vadillo,
Yes.
Member Altabe,
Yes.
Member Collins,
Yes.
Member Ziegler,
Yes.
Member Parrish,
No.
Member Parasoff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Torrance,
Nope.
Chair Gavalia,
Yes.
motion passes 7-2.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Ben.
Next
Chair?
item, please.
Chair, before we go on to the next item, can we ask the city to look into doing a rezone that area?
Ms. Ellis?
We would ask the city has actually been studying the area. We don't have anything with a recommendation. We have taken looking at the area at more depth and more length. So that's already in the works. If you wanted to formally request, we can make it known through the planning director, or we can go ahead and follow through with that information.
I think that we should make a formal request that be studied sooner than later, because these kinds of projects are going to keep coming before us, and they might as well all get on the bandwagon and have a little bit of upzoning.
And I did, and this might be a little late. I wanted to make sure that you were aware that the net administrator for this area was present and still is present. And we wanted to make sure that, and also the representative standing in for Overtown is also in this meeting. So if you have some questions about whether or not they've received information from neighbors, they are present at tonight's meeting.
All right, just feedback. Nice to know before we voted, I guess.
Yeah.
I had raised my hand,
All right.
and unfortunately, I don't know if it's disappearing into the background, but I've raised my hand a couple times and was not recognized.
Is it possible we could ask her? Could we ask her a question? And even though we've already voted about just that general area, what the feeling
No,
was?
I'm not gonna, I mean, the item's over if we want to have it as a discussion item, but I think the net should have raised their hand as well. So I'm assuming they had no feedback because they didn't reach out as well either. So
Thank you.
I recognize I missed one hand, but there were two other hands I didn't see raised.
Thank you.
So from procedural, how do we formalize the vice chair's request to look at the zoning in that area? Can we just make that a directive, or do we need to bring that back as an item in a future meeting?
So it can be an informal directive to city staff. The other option is to a brief resolution on the next PZAB meeting. It's up to the board.
So my recommendation, Vice Chair, is maybe let's put it on for the next meeting where they can actually put the boundaries and the area being studied. I don't think it's going to delay things too much, and hopefully it aligns with the work they already have in progress.
That's fine with me.
Well, I do want to mention something. I know I said next meeting, and I know you had mentioned boundaries and other things that may require some time for staff to put together. And we are out of the office on Friday for the holiday. And I know the agenda, I believe the agenda publishes next week. Is that correct, Erica?
Correct.
So that might be a tight time frame. So I don't know if, city staff can speak to that, if there's enough time for you to look at the boundaries and come up with a brief resolution.
So this is something that we have been working on. It has not been, I'm not sure exactly what the board's expectation is for us to present. It would be helpful to have more time. However, because the next meeting is on the 15th of July, that's a short time period.
Give us a date where you'd be prepared to come back.
So, well, after the 15th, unless, and this is further discussion, I think later on in this meeting, unless there's another meeting in August, the next time we'd be back would be in September.
So we'll just, for now, we'll just say the next meeting after the next meeting. If that's acceptable to the vice chair.
Yes, that's fine with me.
All right. So we have that for an agenda item, City Clerk?
Yes, that's going to be a resolution, correct? Not a discussion, a resolution?
All right. Resolution, yes.
And it's regarding the boundaries for the area that's being studied, the scope essentially.
Yes, based on our discussion with the previous item, I think staff has a pretty good idea of the area.
Thank you.
All right, can we go to the next item? Mr. Ziegler, go ahead if you have comment?
Yeah, well, I want to ask you at the same time, the issue that came up on the last board meeting in regards to the city, the alleyway and the value of those alleyways. Why we basically, when these, if you look along Biscayne Boulevard, I mean, it seems like a lot of value, not only there and other places. The idea that when these developers come there, is there some added value that the city can get from that, at least determine the value that we're giving them, the added value that it gives to the property. Is there any way we can put a resolution whereby when they're asking for these alleyways, there has to be at least some remuneration back to the city in regards to whether it's going to be monetary or contribution towards one of the trust funds. I mean, because basically we're just giving the property away. I mean, we're giving the rights away. I wouldn't say the property per se, but basically giving the rights away. Is there some kind of resolution like I had when I was trying to sort of point out in the last meeting, and it's going to be coming back before us because we asked for him to do to give us back some information before we take a vote on that alleyway vacation. So there's some way or in some sense that we can say, listen, determining, what is the city giving up? What are those rights, quote unquote, worth? I mean, if we're able now to him to assemble the property, it obviously add a tremendous amount of value. And in this particular case, he might do an SAP, which is probably, somewhere down the line. But why should the city give that up? Give up those rights for basically nothing.
So can we add that as a discussion item to maybe go through the law and the legalities of that?
Well, I mean, and I'm just saying the city needs to put some kind of determination on what, the value of, what they're giving up.
Right,
and then determine who they want.
Mr. Ziegler, let the city staff, let's see, I think they got your question. Let's see, I'm looking for a hand. Any hand raised? Ms. Trone.
So I'm just sort of trying to process the conversation that's happening here. Do I understand correctly that you're trying to put forward a resolution to establish a study area boundary based off of the item that you just voted on?
No, not that item. No, I'm talking about the previous item.
Sorry, I'm trying to backtrack. I might be a little bit slower than the conversation here. So the item that was just informally put forward for the meeting after the next, is it that there's a resolution that is desired so that we planning staff would bring forward, you're basically giving direction that planning staff would bring forward boundaries for a study based on this area?
Correct.
No,
Can I just offer that I was one of the two planners with Sergio, in fact, about when I was new in the city. And Mr. Fernandez represented the owner at the time. And when we brought forward that application and it went through you guys, I believe you voted differently. I think you voted in favor of the rezone back in 2016, and it went to City Commission, and City Commission voted in favor of the rezone then and directed staff to do a study of the area. Now, I believe recently that study was conducted by two planners in our office. I don't know if it's fully complete, but I would say it's nearly there. We also, perhaps 18 months ago, did a community meeting. May I offer an idea that not in the next meeting, but in 2 meetings, we have an opportunity, maybe Jacqueline and I, to talk with the planners who worked on the planning study to maybe come forward and present to you what they've done.
Okay.
I think that's a more efficient use because
it sounds reasonable, but let me just, as it was a request from the vice chair, let's see if it aligns with what she had hoped to get out of this. So it sounds like they have, I don't want to call it a study, but an update on a study that they'll come back to us in a couple of meetings and give us here's where we're at. Is that fair, Ms. Trone?
I think a significant amount of work has been done. It seems to me it might get at what you're talking at. And perhaps, if nothing else, we begin on a discourse that if you want more work done, perhaps we proceed from there. And perhaps when we come to you and share with you what's been done in this study, we take feedback from you and we start there as a point of departure, and perhaps you want more information, at which point in time we establish a timeline to come back. Would that be acceptable to you?
It's acceptable to me.
Great.
It's a good start.
So,
Go ahead.
So Vice Chair, if I'm understanding correctly, it will not be a resolution, it would be a discussion.
I think it should be a discussion item instead of a resolution, because if you have something already that you're starting with, come and share that with us so we know what our starting point will be.
Okay.
Great.
Will the discussion item allow the public to weigh in if they, is there a way to put it out there where we're going to seek public? I mean, I will allow public comment.
Yes.
Good idea.
It's on the agenda. Let's make sure that it's a discussion item on the agenda. And then, Erica, if you could work with, I guess, IT or I'm not sure who sets it up.
For the surveys?
It's an option for people to upload public comment, choose that as an option on our web page.
They do. We do put that as an option for the public comment.
So that they should be able to participate that way.
Okay.
And since we have the net folks on the line here, let's make sure, Net, you're taking this into the neighborhood and making sure they're aware that there's going to be a public, I won't call it a public hearing, but a discussion item on their neighborhood.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I offer one other sort of perspective? And this, I think, speaks more to what you were saying, Mr. Ziegler. And you could tell me if I've got this wrong. I think you are asking about when somebody comes forward and requests a change of zoning, and it's about the city giving something. Do I understand that correctly?
No, the issue was they wanted, in this particular one, I'm talking about going back from last week, we had the alleyways in there, and they wanted the alleyways vacated so they can basically assemble the property. Well, my determination is what's the value of those alleyways, especially along Biscayne Boulevard there? I mean, the city needs to determine what that is, and if they decide they want to give that up, fine. In my opinion, there are millions of dollars there because the value of them assembling the property obviously increases a lot, and also what they can do. So I'm saying, why is the city giving that up for basically nothing? I mean, eventually, you're going to get a bigger project or a nicer project, but right at the immediate, anyway, that has value. So why is the city giving that away for basically nothing? That's my thing. I mean, they wouldn't be able to do that unless you vacate those alleys. Or it can significantly change the project. That's all I'm saying. And I've seen it on a couple of projects that basically, oh yeah, we want to build this, we need to vacate the alley, we want to go across it or whatever. But the city gets nothing in return. I mean, I'm looking at it from a business standpoint. Why give it free?
Mr. Ziegler, I'm going to pause, respectfully pause for a moment, because I'd like to get through the next two items, and then I'll open the floor back up for the discussion items and ask staff to see what they can do to provide you clarity or give the board more clarity on your request. But let's get to the next two agenda items, and then we'll take it back. I'll take it back to you, Mr. Ziegler.
Okay.
PZAB item 3.
Hold on, Ms. Ellis.
So, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, it looks like you want to move on to the next items. I do want to pick up on the alleys. This alley question's been going on since I believe board member Martin was here. And I just want to revisit on how those lands revert to the abutting properties. We can take it up as another discussion item, but I would want Public Works to be here and be available to have participation in that discussion.
We'll talk about it after we conclude these two items.
Correct.
PZAB item 3, file ID 7557, a resolution of the Miami Planning, Zoning and Appeals Board with attachments recommending approval of the ordinance to the Miami City Commission, amending ordinance number 10544 as amended the future land use map of the Miami Comprehensive Neighborhood Plan pursuant to small-scale amendment procedures subject to 163-3187 Florida statutes by changing the future land use designation from light industrial to restricted commercial of the acreage described herein of real property at 690 Northwest 13th Street, Miami, Florida, as more particularly described in Exhibit A, making findings containing a severability clause and providing for an effective date. PZAB Item 4, File ID 7558, a resolution of the Miami Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board with attachment recommending approval of an ordinance to the Miami City Commission amending the zoning atlas of the ordinance number 13114 as amended by changing the zoning classification from D1 Workplace District Transect Zones to T6-12-0 Urban Core Transect Zones open for the property located at 690 Northwest 13th Street, Miami, Florida, as more particularly described in the attached and incorporated Exhibit A, making findings containing a severability clause and providing for an effective date.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Eisenberg with the City of Miami.
Can we just make sure the applicant is sworn in, please?
Thank you. Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Inés Marrero, and there's somebody here to swear me in, so I'm going to ask her to come in, put my mask. Okay, yeah. We had the backup affidavit too, but I think this is better. So,
okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony provided on July 1st, 2020 at the Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board meeting for the matter specified is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Eisenberg.
So again, good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Eisenberg with the City of Miami's Planning Department. I'm here to present the next two agenda items. And there are really three agenda items three items that the city is working on currently that we can describe as a family of items that all work together and relate together. The third of those items unfortunately missed this agenda and missed the July 15th agenda, but it was a study that the city conducted starting 9 months ago related to the area generally bounded by the Miami River, the 836, and I-95. And that area, where we're calling it the Culmer Quarters, the item we're bringing forward is the northwestern quadrant of that around the Culmer Metro Rail Station. The second item is a zoning text amendment that deals with T68 zone properties and TOD areas. That would affect the city-initiated rezoning that is not on this agenda, that third item. And this item, a rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment change to T6-12-0, which is the request, and T6-80, which is the city's recommendation, would take advantage of the zoning text amendment that's coming up next. So we've probably ordered these backwards, but if there are any questions at the end of the presentation as to how these three items relate, I'd be happy to answer them. So we're here to discuss the property located at 690 Northwest 13th Street. The applicant has requested a future land use map change from light industrial to restricted commercial and a zoning change from D1 to T6-12-0. The City of Miami is recommending approval, but only approval of the future land use map change as requested and approval of the zoning change from D1 to T6-80. You can see the property highlighted in yellow on your screen. The property is generally bounded by Northwest 7th Avenue on the west, Northwest 13th Street on the north, the driveway into Booker T. Washington High and the Metro Rail Guideway on the south, and Booker T. Washington High on the east. It's important to note that this property was the former site of the Biscayne Chemical Storage facility, and as a result, there is some fairly substantial chemical contamination on the site. Luckily, the chemical contamination has migrated towards Northwest 7th Avenue, not towards the high school, but it still does represent a pretty substantial challenge to the health and safety of those around. On the left, you'll see a map of the existing future land use map designation, light industrial, and on the right, you'll see the future land use map that is proposed to restricted commercial. You can see that abutting across 7th Avenue, there is a precedent for restricted commercial in this vicinity. In doing the comprehensive plan amendment analysis, there was a thorough analysis done of all the concurrency analyses that we typically run. I wanted to point out that this is an area especially rich in mass transportation options. So the Metro Rail Station is here, practically catty-corner to this property. It's also transversed by numerous county bus routes and city trolley routes. This is maybe one of the most transit-rich places outside of the downtown core. In running those concurrency analyses, planning found that every concurrency check passed except for the school concurrency for elementary schools, which is not a problematic thing to have fail. That's actually how the system was set up to work, thanks to Comprehensive Plan Policy LU 1.6.9, where mitigation of the failure of school capacity at the time of site plan approval will be done by mitigation through the interlocal agreement. So when this site redevelops, if it redevelops, when new residential units come in, the school board will assess the site plan, and they will then decide if additional capacity is necessary, what the cost to mitigate that would be. And that money would go to build new classroom facilities, hire more teachers, those sorts of things. We also assessed this and found it consistent with policy LU 1.3.2, policy TR 1.1.1, and policy 1.1.3. Here we are back to the property aerial. I think it's again important when talking about the zoning to note the proximity to Northwest 7th Avenue, the Metro Rail Guideway on the south, and Booker T. Washington High School on the east. You can see the request on the left, or the existing zoning on the left, rather. The property is currently zoned D1, and the requested zoning on the right with the property zoned T612-0. You'll notice that there is no precedent for T612-0 in this vicinity. It is a property that is large enough on its own to request a designation that is not immediately adjacent or abutting. However, planning staff felt because of the abundance of T68 around this property, that T68 is a preferable designation to recommend approval for. That said, the zoning text amendment that's coming up next may confer some additional height and some additional FLR to this property should a rezoning to T68 occur. This is a shot of the broader context. When running this analysis, the planning department wanted to be sure that the impact of additional height on this site was not substantially impactful to Booker T. Washington High School. We found that as the sun sweeps from the right-hand side of the screen to the left-hand side of the screen throughout the day, that it will only cast substantial shadows on Booker T. Washington High School in the evenings once school has finished. So we're not concerned about the impact of scale on Booker T. Washington, and there is precedent for T68 property in the vicinity. So this is a question I like to ask. What does a rezoning do? A rezoning typically does three things. It can modify underlying residential density. In this case, rezoning from D1 to T6 will increase the density from 36 units per acre to 150 units per acre. That results in an increase in buildable units on site from 100 residential units to 420 residential units. A rezoning can also modify the built form of new buildings. The principal change here is that D1 allows 10 stories and T68 allows 12 stories. But an interesting nuance there is that D1 functions by stories and lot coverage alone. So you get a 10-story, 80% lot coverage box. T68, while it's allowed to go to 12 stories, has an FLR limitation. So planning staff's recommendation to T68 from D1 actually yields a decrease in overall potential floor area, going from 782,000 square feet as of right down to 610,000 square feet as of right. It's worth noting that should the applicant's request move forward, the site could allow 12 stories by right, 8 additional stories by bonus, and it would yield an increase to 977,500 square feet of bonus FLR. And I'd like to also note that the city is not opposed to that. As the text amendment that's coming in the subsequent item will show, the possibility of conferring some additional FLR to this site would be something that text amendment supports, although it would only allow that additional FLR in exchange for workforce housing at or below 100% area median income. The last thing a rezoning typically does is modifies allowable uses. You can see the red band on the far right-hand side of the screen shows the existing zoning category, D1, and the one to the left of that shows T60. And whether this property is rezoned to T680 or T612O, the allowable uses do not change. One of the biggest changes on this screen is that there are a much wider range of residential uses that are permitted in T60 versus D1. Lodging is almost identical, although T60 allows hotel as of right. On this screen, you'll see that some of the commercial uses that are allowed by right in the district zone in D1 become the warrant procedure in T60. And there's also some modifications to the civil support uses. Lastly, and possibly most impactfully, is you see a major decrease in industrial uses. They in fact go away. So all the industrial uses allowed in D1 or D2 are as of right in those zoning categories. Those would be expressly prohibited in T60. That's particularly important considering the environmental contamination on the site. In reviewing this rezoning application and comprehensive plan application, we are given criteria 1A, which is to assess the rezoning, this is specific to the rezoning, the relationship of the proposed amendment to the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, with consideration of the goals and objectives of Miami 21 as well. We talked about these policies that are consistent previously, but let's talk about some of Miami 21's criteria. The first is, we should rebuild the city's commercial corridors to function as mixed-use, transit-oriented walkable centers for adjacent residential neighborhoods. I think the slide that shows the abundance of transit in this location makes a very good case that a rezoning away from D1 in this location is a positive step and fulfills this policy. Next, growth strategy should encourage infill and redevelopment. The Culmer Station is a bit of an oddity because it does have T68L zoning around it, which can go to 150 units per acre, although that Metro Rail station is the fifth least utilized Metro Rail station in the entire network. And the Culmer Station T68 properties is zoned to about 5% of its overall development capacity. A rezoning from D1 to T68 in this location will encourage infill and redevelopment, and through that process, it will lead to the remediation of the environmental contamination on the site. Next, transportation corridors should be planned and reserved in coordination with land use. This is a place where possibly at one time light industrial uses made sense, but today, due to its proximity to fixed rail mass transportation, mixed use or a residential project makes more sense here. And lastly, a diversity of land use should be distributed throughout the city to enable a variety of economic activity, workplace, residence, recreation, and civic activity. And this is one that I wanted to put in here because you've heard planning staff come before the PZAB before and say we need to preserve light industrial uses. It's important for the economic health of the city on the aggregate to have light industrial options to keep those jobs and those industries close to the center city. When we're talking about that, it's largely and often in reference to the large bands of D1, the groupings of D1, where light industrial uses or heavy industrial uses don't have deleterious effects to the surrounding property. Places like the industrial band through the middle of Allapattah, there's another east-west running industrial band to the north of the city. I'm going to go back to the zoning map just to point out. This band of D1 runs along 7th Avenue and then along the Metro Rail Guideway, but there is predominantly residential zoning everywhere else, and you have a large high school, Booker T. Washington High School, in the middle. This is a place where we feel, due to the built character, which is largely commercial, and the disaggregated ownership, one of these parcels that's zoned D1 is even a Miami-Dade County public housing site. This is probably not the best place in the city to have a band of industrial uses. Next, criteria 1B, the need and justification for the proposed change, including change or changing conditions that make the passage of that proposed change necessary. We found that consistent. That points to the point I just spoke about the changing nature of zoning, the need for industrial uses in some places, but not necessarily in this location, particularly due to its proximity to transit. And criteria 2, a change may be made only to the next intensity transect zone or by a special area plan and in a manner which maintains the goals of the Miami 21 code to preserve neighborhoods and to provide transitions in intensity and building height. This will result in a de minimis increase in height. However, considering the surrounding context, we believe that that increase in height is justified, especially considering that rezoning this property away from D1, from which we've seen a demonstrative decrease in overall demand in the past couple of years will likely result in a mixed use or a residential redevelopment that helps to remediate the site. And the successional zoning chart is a little bit vague when it refers to D1. It allows planning staff to determine the appropriate successional zoning category because there is D1 scattered throughout the city. T612O is successional from D1, as is T68. Planning staff's preference is a rezoning to T68. That said, the planning department is recommending a rezoning from D1 to T680, and recommending approval of the requested flume change from light industrial to restricted commercial. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll give it over to the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. My name is Ines Marrero. It's very nice to see everybody again. These are very weird circumstances, but seeing the familiar faces of the board members and the hardworking staff who continue to move us along during these very difficult days is very heartening. So thank you to everybody. And welcome to the new board member. I'm an attorney with offices at 701 Brickell Avenue, and I am here this evening representing KTLC Biscayne LLC. Staff has done a fantastic job in their evaluation. It is so thorough, I don't need to repeat their supporting review of our request for the land use plan. It's very clear that this property should not continue to be an industrially designated property. This is the site of a very contaminated chemical storage facility, distribution facility. It's been closed down for many years, and the efforts to redevelop it by previous owners has been stalled because it needs to be cleaned up. And that's a Herculean effort. So we're here today requesting the land use change and the rezoning to T612. And there's one item in the staff report that Mr. Eisenberg didn't cover that I think speaks volumes of the need for our application. And it's a document in the report that was prepared by Sue Trone that talks about the economics of this area of the city and the census block information. And I'll just very quickly read it into the record. The median household income of this area is $24,750. The percent of people below the poverty line in this area is 33%. And 93% of the residents in this area are rentals. I'm sorry, 93% of the residents in this area are rental. So that is a good segue to our request for the rezoning. Clearly, the staff recognizes that it is appropriate to change the designation on the land use plan, but they're recommending T68. So my job here tonight is to explain to you why T612 is not only warranted, it's badly needed. I appreciate the recognition that successional zoning has been met because that was an important step in us moving forward with what we need to do. There's four goals, very simply, very simply four goals. The first goal is housing, real housing. The difference between T612 and T68 is that we get more height and more FAR. Both designations will allow the same number of residential dwelling units. But if we get more FAR and if we get more height, then we can build real units. We don't have to be tied to building micro units and studios and one bedroom. Our community needs real housing opportunity for families, for working teachers that work at Booker T. Washington, for people in the community. This area is a desert. There's an anecdotal reference to this specific to Booker T. Washington for me personally. Many years ago, I was at some meeting and Francis Suarez's dad, Xavier Suarez, for some reason was talking about Booker T. Washington. And he says, everybody knows where it is. You see it when you're in the expressway, but you don't know how to get to it. Nobody travels down this way. We need to activate it. And this is what this application will do. If we have more FAR and we have more height, then we can build a real project that has real housing and put commercial that serves this community. The property across the street from us is currently developed as an affordable housing project, St. Martin. I have in my notes. St. Martin's Place. It's an affordable housing project. When I submitted this application, I called just to find out how many units they had and what was the process for applying. Back in November of last year, they had a 1.5 year waiting list for a unit in that building. I know everybody knows that we need housing desperately. So again, the first goal is housing because we need it, and this is a great opportunity. The second goal is TODD infill. We just had, again, an excellent presentation from staff telling us why this is not only a transit station, it's an underutilized transit station, and that's what we should build. That's where our comprehensive plan, all the planning goals say this is where we should build high density. We're also next to a high school. We should not have an industrial facility, a contaminated facility next to a high school. So that leads me to the third point, environmental remediation, brownfield redevelopment, and incentivizing a developer to come in and clean it up. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's complicated. Part of the entire report is in your package, but one of the items that will have to be addressed as part of cleaning up the site is cleaning up some of the Booker T. Washington property, because there is some migration. So it's complicated. And I think the fourth goal is neighborhood creation. And I think it touches on things that always coincidentally, it's good to be second, but subjects that came up in the previous application. We are adding units and we're not displacing anybody. We are creating community. We are creating a place for people to come live, to have opportunities for commerce, and to be right next door to transit, and to be right next to the school. So there's no intrusion and there's no displacement. It's pretty outstanding. We don't see that very often. And so I'm open to any questions you may have. I decided not to do PowerPoint. The presentation materials that the staff prepared were very thorough, and their recommendation, we are in agreement with their entire land use analysis. And on the zoning, we really feel that the T612 is justified, is needed, and that it will give us the tools to be able, like I said, to build residential units that are what the community needs. And so we're open to any questions. I know that some of the members of our team, including our environmental attorney, is available for questions, but that sums it up.
Thank you. Do we have any last minute public comments?
No, we don't.
All right. Nothing at City Hall?
No, we don't. And we do have the net. We do have a net representative.
All right. So let me close the public hearing, and I'll turn it over to Net if you have some comments.
Good evening to each of you. The only comments that I received from the neighborhood was that if
you are, and if you could identify yourself.
I apologize. Von Carol Kenchins, Director of NET.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the comments that I did receive from the residents, some of the residents in the area, that if this is going to be housing going up, that the folks in Overtown be given an opportunity to work on this project, whatever it may be. So they are in agreement with this project.
Thank you. All right, I'll bring it back to the board, looking for someone's hand. Mr. Parrish?
I'll start off again. Yeah, this looks like a great project, and I have a question for Ms. Marrero. Everything around there pretty much is Booker T, and it is landlocked by the highways. Has the school board ever approached the owner to say, what would you sell us this property for? Because we'd like to expand our campus.
It's the other way around. We've approached the school board to joint venture with them in being able to aggregate that sliver of land between us and the one immediately south of us. So they're not interested. We have met with them, and they're not interested in acquiring our property. They are interested, obviously, in the property being cleaned up. And there are some preliminary discussions about us either aggregating their site to our development or buying their land. We're still in early negotiations. The school board moves very quick, very slowly.
Okay, yeah, I know they do. And I'm glad you've been in touch with them. Second question is what Ms. Von Kitchens brought up. We know the area needs housing, but it always comes up, the housing for whom? How do you intend to keep this from being another gentrification project where the people who move in are not community residents from the immediate community? I know Miami as a whole needs more housing and more 2 and 3 bedroom units, but how is this going to serve this particular community? That would be my question.
Well, right now the community needs the housing. So if we were to build a project, it would be open to applicants, people from the community who have a desire to live there. We want to build units that are real units with multiple bedrooms, not efficiencies, not micro units for families. And we would give preferential treatment for people from the community. But of course, that really becomes a more complicated question down the line when the project is being financed and when you have affordable housing developer joint venturing with us to decide the program that we use to rent the units out. But
okay,
I would say this in this community, in that area, and that's why I thought it was important to mention the economics about this particular area. The market in this area is affordable. Nobody's going to go in and move into a unit and pay, $3,000 a month. So while we will make it affordable, even if we made market, it would be below market to be able to initially attract members of the community to move into this building.
Right. Thank you. I think I saw Mr. Collins' hand up, and then we'll follow by Mr. Dominguez.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if Joe could go back to that slide about the FAR and number of stories, and just wanted to try to get a little bit more into the details of the comparison between T68 and T612.
Certainly. I'll leave this up for a second. Something that I'll say that goes back to Mr. Parrish's point a second ago about housing. And one of the reasons that we're recommending T68 in lieu of T612, we're recommending T68 because T68 tends to maximize FLR, which means we get the full by right FLR from a development, and we also get the full bonus FLR and height from a development. Whereas rezonings to T612, especially in places that are 150 dwelling units per acre, tend to simply use their by right height and FLR, which means the city is being deprived of some public benefits that our elected officials could dispense for the purposes of building affordable housing. And not to spill the beans on the zoning text amendment that's upcoming, but T680 in this location with that text amendment in effect would confer this property roughly the same FLR, a little bit less, and some height flexibilities that they would get with T612. The difference would be, instead of structuring the bonus and by right height and FLR like it is today, where you go through all of your by right FLR and bonus by right FLR and height, and then you get your bonus, under this new text amendment, you would get your by right FLR of T68, your bonus height of T68, your special bonus because of TOD proximity, and then some by right height at the top, encouraging developers to contribute even more public benefits. And that public benefit would only be available for the provision of either on-site workforce housing at 100% AMI or contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to produce housing at 100% of AMI, which is an AMI level that we know is underserved and a major commitment of several of our elected officials.
So if I may respond, why this counterintuitive? Why would we be asking for T612 if we could maximize development under T68 with the same density? So again, the intent is to be able to build real housing units and to maximize the floor plate. And if we have more height and we have more FAR, then we can also design a building that is not as rigid in terms of its we may not need all the height, we may not need all the FAR, but we have more flexibility. The box is more ample for us to be able to develop what we need to build. And so that's what we're asking for. And the benefit here is the environmental cleanup and the ability to bring in a project that hopefully will spearhead other residential developments in that corridor. I did have an opportunity to review the initial draft that Mr. Eisenberg was discussing. And if we were to take advantage of that with the T68, we still wouldn't get to the height in the FAR that we would get with a T612. My calculations, we'd be looking with the proposed amendment, and again, it's still being considered. It may not get adopted. So we don't want to wait for that to be adopted to be able to implement our plan. But if it were to be adopted and we had a T68, we would get an 8.25 FAR. Whereas if we were to just get our straight T612, we could get over 10 FAR. And again, it's all about having a big bundle of development flexibility so that we can then go sit down and design a project that we can build in a manner that will deliver the units that are badly needed in a way that's affordable. If we didn't need it, we wouldn't be asking for it.
Ms. Murrow, would you be able to quantify, what would be an average apartment size in T68 versus T612 for your project?
No, I don't think we have that yet. Okay. We've not run that level of detail yet.
I know the item that's after you has not been heard by this board or approved, but I'm curious if you have gone through it and if approved as is, would that be feasible for your project?
Well, it would not match what we're asking for. It would come short. Those are the numbers that I just recited. With the amendment that's being proposed, the maximum height would be 18 stories, availing itself of all the bonuses. With T612, we could get an extra 2 floors. And also the FAR for the amendment that the city is proposing would give us 8.2. And with a T612, we would get 10.4. And again, we're trying to be able to put as much into the project. If there's an opportunity to do real commercial, also to serve the community, this is a desert in terms of retail opportunities for the community. And I know that retail is being impacted, but people still need to buy groceries. And we may be able to put a grocery in there. We may be able to participate in other community serving, badly needed retail that will benefit, because not only are we going to have residents and the residents across the street, but we have high school students and teachers in a fairly large high school next door to us that can support that retail. So we just are asking for the most flexibility, because the endeavor to undertake the environmental cleanup is quite a lift, and it justifies the ask. By way of example, and it's different because it's happened under the previous code, but all of us remember Midtown. Midtown was a rail yard. It was a brownfield. It was super contaminated, and it was cleaned up. And all these buildings at an incredible height and incredible density have now been built. What we're asking for is nowhere near the densities that you have in Midtown. But that corroborates the need for more height and more FAR and more density to sustain the environmental cleanup of these sites.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Dominguez? I don't know if anyone's hearing Mr. Dominguez.
Yeah, you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Collins did a good job of covering what I was going to ask, and the attorney did a really good job of answering the question. So I'd like to make a motion, unless anybody else has.
Let's just see if I saw Mr. Alcalde's hand go up.
Yes,
Go ahead.
please.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally support the construction of something like presented in that area, but I like very much the reasons that the city is giving to T68 that will maximize public benefits to reach the same result as T612. I'd much rather go with the city recommendation and maximize the public benefits.
Right, hold on, let's get through some more board member comments. Mr. Ziegler?
Yeah, well, I had a sort of similar question. When I looked at the chart, Joe, that you put up there, I'm looking at, you get more square footage and bonuses under the 12 versus the 8, at the bottom there. And it seemed like, I guess I'm coming to almost that same conclusion. It seems like if I went to the T68 way, the city gets more. You're saying the city has a more advantage, or is more advantageous to the city as far as control over the project, as far as where they have to donate money if they don't do this or that? I didn't sort of, maybe just walk through that for one quick second again, like why you think that's better than the other. I didn't quite follow you on that.
Sure. So the point that I was trying to make with that slide is that you have a building that you can build at T68, and that has buy right and bonus inside of it. You can maximize and you get a building. When you rezone to T612, you get a much larger buy right, and you get a larger bonus on the top end. You can take a building in T68, all of the bonus and all the buy right, and you can put it in the buy right volume of T612. So you can build the same building in T68 that would give the city public benefits. You can build that as of right in T612. And the zoning text amendment that I'm describing coming up next, and again, apologies on the city side for structuring these the way that we did. It would have been much more preferable to reverse them. But effectively, by my calculations, T612 would confer an FLR of 10.4, and T680 with this public benefit confers an FLR of 10.25. So they're very close in terms of FLR, and it's possible that Inez did not see the most recent draft, maybe an earlier draft. And there are also some height flexibilities built in there, so it can get fairly close to the height of T612. But again, the real benefit of the city's recommendation is that if an applicant builds a smaller building, the city probably still gets public benefits. If the developer builds a bigger building in our scheme, the city gets even more public benefits as a result.
Well, if I may,
Let
I
me
just
just
confirm.
hold on, Mr. Altaf. Mr. Ziegler, are you?
Yeah, I'm satisfied. Yeah, I'm satisfied.
There's always, the benefit is in building.
Right, so let's go to
housing.
Hold on. Mr. Altaf, quickly, but then I want to Mr.
Yeah,
Perry.
very quickly. I just confirm my first impression that is a lot more convenient. Follow the recommendation of the city, because the developer can still reach the same building, but the city will maximize the public benefit. So I would like to make the motion to go with the recommendation of the city to approve this by T68.
We'll come. I think we have a couple of folks who wanted motion, so I got two hands up.
Right.
I have Mr. Collins and Mr. Parrish. We'll start with Mr. Parrish, please.
I just have a question for Iris. Who are the principals of this applicant, and what other projects have they built?
One of the principals of the project is Michael Goldstein. He's an environmental attorney, and he is spearheading the actual environmental cleanup and remediation effort of the site.
But he's not a developer. He's an environmental specialist. I know Michael. And what other projects? I mean, this is going to be a large building, no matter who builds it. So they have to have some experienced builder. What other projects has this developer done in the city of Miami?
They are not a developer. They are entitling the property, and they are facilitating the remediation, because that's what's held up the ability to develop the property. And importantly, I need to go back to the 6 versus 8. Our intent is to build larger units. We cannot lose track. The number of units remains the same. If we want to get additional units, then they have to be affordable, because that's how you get the bonuses. And once we're doing that, all of the bonuses in the city are to encourage the development of affordable housing units. To argue that that we will build less, or that the city gets more benefit, more monetary benefit, goes counter to the intent of the bonus. The bonus is to create the actual housing units. How much money have developers paid to the city to go into this, public benefit trust fund, where nothing comes out of it? You guys have asked for exactly that analysis to find out where does the money go to. And we're telling you right now that what we want is to build it. We don't want to pay, we want to build it. And to build it, we need to have the FAR.
That is precisely why I'm asking, what other major projects has this group, whoever is involved with, done? Because this is not just building a couple of houses. This is going to be a major edifice in the city of Miami. So what other projects have they done?
I don't think they've done another project in the city of Miami.
Okay.
But you don't need to be a developer. You can be at the stage that we are, where we buy the land, where we clean it up, where we entitle it, and then we partner with a developer that builds affordable housing. And then they bring in the architects and they market and they do all the other steps. Not everybody has to be a developer.
No,
project,
what I'm really getting at, Iris, is I'm just trying to make sure that this does not gentrify the neighborhood. And I wanted to know if there were other projects that they'd done. And your answer actually satisfies that. I'm satisfied that they want to do the right thing, and I hope that they do.
Mr. Collins?
I was just curious if there was a dollar amount on the environmental cleanup. I was just curious what it was going to take to clean up.
I don't have that. It's in the millions of dollars, obviously, and time and effort and sitting with the school board and getting the rights to access their property, getting all the waivers. There's a lot of soft and hard costs, but it's in the millions of dollars.
I mean, my first reaction.
Michael Goldstein, I don't know, Erica, if you want to let him speak, but he just texted me that if he's allowed, he can respond to the question. He's here.
I'm sorry, is someone there to swear him in?
Yes, I think he did. He does have somebody in his office.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, we'll have to submit an after the fact affidavit.
Sir, wait 1 second. Do you have someone there that can swear you in, and can you go on camera, please? Is there someone there to swear you in?
No, there is not.
Okay.
Someone, go ahead.
The city's requirements are that anybody providing testimony regarding applications needs to be sworn in. We made that very clear to all applicants.
Right.
I thought there was an after the fact affidavit that I received from hearing boards.
That affidavit was an alternative to doing it live on camera, but it still needs to occur after the meeting is open and before the individual speaks on the item. And then you can email that to hearing board stating that you were sworn in.
All right, so I'll bring it back to, we have two folks. I'm sorry, Mr. Collins, go ahead.
My first reaction to this item was the concern over the building height and the possibility of going 20 stories, but then to learn that with the potential item coming up after us, that they could get to 18 with a T6-8 zoning that the city is recommending, kind of made that a moot point for me. So my next instinct is that with the amount of costs that are associated with cleaning up a site like this, and I think there's a reason why it's been vacant for so long, is it just didn't economically work for anyone to clean it up and to develop it. So I'm leaning towards the applicant's desire to go to T612 to give them the total flexibility that is going to make their project work and provide them the extra money to actually clean this up. So welcome any other board members' thoughts, but at the conclusion, I'd like to make a motion to approve the T612 when the time comes.
So I'm out of just who came in first. So Mr. Dominguez, you were the first one to offer a request to do a motion. So I'll turn it to you for a motion.
Well, I agree with Mr. Collins and I agree with Ms. Bregas, but I know that there is a competing, Mr. Altavi had wanted to consider a motion as well, but my motion would be the same as Mr. Collins, to give them the maximum benefit. The number of units are going to be the same and they can make bigger units. Why not?
So just make your statement in form of a motion.
My motion would be to approve PZAB 34 to go to T612.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's the second?
Chris, Member Collins.
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins. Can we call the roll, please?
Chair, remember that this also requires a supermajority vote to recommend approval.
Right.
which is 6 members.
Member Dominguez?
Hold
Yes.
on. Ms.
Sorry.
Ms. Ellis has a question. Hand up. Something.
Can you unmute yourself? Okay, yes.
So I apologize. My electricity went off for a moment, so I did miss a portion of the presentations. I just remind everyone that typically the first item we vote on would be the land use request, then followed by the zoning request. I understand the motion was currently made for the rezone.
Okay, I'd like to make it, you guys hear me?
Yes.
A request to approve PZAB, what are the numbers?
4.
3 and 4?
3 is the land.
One at a
Three.
time.
3 is the land use. And
Land use,
And 4 is the rezone.
okay. Let's go ahead and make a motion to approve PZAB 3 for the land use.
Second.
And that's at what, as requested,
Request.
correct?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
as requested.
And a second by Mr. Collins. Call the roll, please.
Member Dominguez?
Yes,
Member Collins?
Yes.
Member Altabe?
Nope.
I'm sorry, Member Altabe?
Nope.
Member Parrish?
No.
Member Vidal?
Yes.
Member Ziegler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torrance? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Well, Vice Chair Torrance, yes. Member Porosov?
Yes.
Chair Gavalia?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-2. And can we get a vote for PZ4? The rezone?
Motion
Yeah, I'd like
by
to make-
Mr. Dominguez,
yeah, I'd like to make a motion for PZAB 4, to change the zoning to T612.
Second.
second by Mr. Collins. Call the roll, please.
Member Dominguez?
Yes,
Member Collins?
Yes.
Member Altabe?
Nope.
Member Parrish?
No.
Member Vidal?
Yes.
Member Ziegler?
Yes.
Member Porosov?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torrance?
Yes.
Chair Gavalia?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-2.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And again, everybody stay safe. And thanks for everything you're doing. It's appreciated.
Thank you. Next item, please.
PZ5, file ID 7463. The resolution of the Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board recommending approval of an ordinance of the Miami City Commission amending ordinance number 13114, the zoning ordinance of the City of Miami, Florida, as amended, Miami 21 Code, more specifically by amending Article 3, Section 3.14, titled Public Benefits Program, to distinguish the appropriate abutting condition for T6-8-0 Urban Core Transect Zone, Open and CS Civic Space Transect Zone, zoned property, and to incorporate additional bonus and by right floor to lot ratio and flexibility in stories for property zoned T6-80 Urban Core Transit Zone, open in transit oriented developments area, only in exchange for the provisions of affordable workforce housing at or below 100% area median income, making findings containing a severability clause and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Again, Joseph Eisenberg with the City of Miami's Planning Department. And again, apologies for sequencing these items the way that we did. It would have been great to get these the other direction. But now that we're here, let's talk about the zoning text amendment. This item does two things. First, it minimally addresses the T680 and CS appropriate abutting condition, and it creates a new benefit for properties only zoned to T680 and only in transit-oriented development areas. The first thing affects this code language. Miami 21 says the bonus shall not be available to properties in T6 zone if the property abuts a T3 zone, or in a T68 zone if the property abuts a CS zone. What's especially particular about this is that it says T68 only, not T612, not T624, not T680. So in the downtown core, we have a situation that looks like this. This is Southside Park. It's immediately abutting T624 AO property. That property can go to 24 stories by right and can bonus up to 48 stories. But that provision in Miami 21 doesn't cover this situation. It's only properties zoned T68, which are only 12 stories, have substantial setbacks above the 8th story. It's just a little bit peculiar. This is the third item I mentioned at the top of my presentation last time. The city is moving forward very shortly with a rezoning from T68L to T680, the property around the Colmer Metro Rail Station. The Colmer Metro Rail Station is down here towards the bottom of the screen. This provision needs to be modified because of this CS property in the middle. This is technically an abutting condition with all this property around it, which would prevent a good chunk of this property in this robust TOD that's well served by transit from taking advantage of any public benefits whatsoever. We're proposing modifying the language from an abutting condition to sharing a property line with the CS zone. So if a T68 zone property elsewhere in the city abuts along a property line with a CS zone, you could not take advantage of bonus height and FLR. You can see this one, it's abutting across rights of ways all around. So there's minimum a 50-foot right of way in between the park and any development, and then a more substantial buffer built in with any sort of front setback on the eventual construction that goes abutting the CS. So this is that Colmer TOD. It's important to note that this entire area is 150 dwelling units per acre. And there's something peculiar about dwelling 150 units per acre in T68. And it's best encapsulated by the Edgewater neighborhood, which is another somewhat peculiar neighborhood right on the water in the 20s and 30s in Miami. The zoning here is T636A L and it's O along Biscayne Boulevard. This can go to 36 stories by right and 60 stories by bonus. And in Edgewater, you get two prototypical types of developments. You get developments like Blue 27, which is a fairly conventional mid-rise apartment building or condo. And you get developments like Elysee on the right, which has 1 or 2 or 4 units per floor and goes into that 30, 40 story range. And that's because of the building volume and how it matches up with 150 dwelling units per acre. You can see on the left a building that's T680. The first 8 stories are as of right. The upper 4 stories are bonus. On the right, you can see a building T612. The first 12 stories are by right, and the upper 8 stories are by bonus. And if you look at Blue 27 on the left-hand side of your screen, it looks an awful lot like that T680 building on the left-hand side. We can accept that at 150 dwelling units per acre, which this entire Colmer neighborhood is zoned, and all T68 properties, you're probably going to get the kind of development on the left-hand side, because that's prototypical even in a place where you can build 36 stories or even 60 stories. What's problematic about this, and we've had a lot of interest in the Colmer area to rezone to T612O, you saw that in the last application, is that this entire building fits inside the by right height and FLR of a T612 building. So if someone develops a Blue 27 type building in this, there's a fairly good chance the city gets some public benefits. If a developer builds a Blue 27 type building in T612, it's highly likely that the building is entirely by right and the city does not get any public benefits. That's why we're proposing this text amendment for T680 properties in TOD areas. It allows an additional 2 bonus and additional 2 by right FLR in T68 only. It permits flexibility with stories with an unlimited number of stories up to 235 feet or 179 feet within 500 feet of T3. 179 feet is significant because it's the maximum height in feet that you can get to without any story flexibilities in T68 today. So if you're within 500 feet of T3, you get the same height in feet that you would get in T680 without this public benefit. And the public benefit is only available to developers in exchange for the provision of on-site income-restricted housing at or below 100% AMI for residential projects, or for payment into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund explicitly for 100% AMI units. This is important. We've heard from our elected officials several times that this is a very important AMI level that's not being satisfied by development in the city. Subsidized projects tend to hit lower AMI levels, and market rate development tends to hit higher AMI levels, but 100% AMI is still a needed AMI level and something that we can provide with this new TOD benefit. So this is how it looks in practice. So when you're inside 500 feet of T3, the height of the building is the same height of building. You begin building by right, and then you exhaust your T68 bonus FLR, and then you get your new bonus FLR, and then you get your by right FLR only after you've exhausted all your other public benefits. When you're outside of T68, outside of 500 feet from T3, it's a similar situation, although the height is increased to 235, which is the midpoint between T680 and T612, encouraging that transition in scale that we like to see with new development. And the theory is the same. You get your T68 building by right, but once you go into that additional FLR and height flexibility, it's all bonus until the end. So this additional by right FLR becomes the carrot that encourages developers to fully utilize their public benefits and to give the city much needed affordable housing. Another potential effect of this amendment is with the story flexibility, we may see developers doing smaller floor-to-floor heights for their developments. The first 8 stories can be at 80% lot coverage, and then when you get above the 8th story, you get squeezed in for the tower. When you only have 12 stories, you're encouraged to maximize floor-to-floor height and make your podium as tall as possible. When you provide this additional height benefit within the same volume, odds are developers will try to compact their podium as much as possible, making the most impactful mass of the building smaller. And that's just a possible effect of this. It's a possible impact, but it's one that we expect we'll see if people take advantage of this. This is a TOD benefit that affects T680 properties. So I think it's important to look at how this would potentially affect all the TODs that have T68 property in them. So this is the Douglas Road TOD. There's a small piece of T68 property here. This is platform 3750. It's a committed project. I believe it's being built now. So it's unlikely to, this new public benefit is unlikely to affect Douglas Road in its current form. Coconut Grove TOD has many properties that are within that 500-foot buffer from T3. So the height in feet would not change, although there would be some potential flexibilities with that bonus FLR and some floor-to-floor heights. The Brickell TOD, all of this T680 property is abutting T3 and would not be allowed to utilize any public benefits whatsoever, but this portion a little bit closer to the downtown core would be able to utilize this public benefit. The downtown TOD has some T68 properties scattered around. Again, on the edge of the downtown core, so additional height and height flexibilities is not as jarring. This piece here is within 500 feet of Spring Garden, so they would be limited in height to 179 feet. The Santa Clara TOD, the station is here. There's a band of T68 that runs out this direction that would be able to take advantage of it, and here. But the proximity to T3 would mean that the height for most of these properties would be capped at 179 feet. We also have some TOD property at the northern edge of the city. The Metro Rail kind of runs along the 112. This band is T68 zone property, but much of it abuts directly T3 and wouldn't be able to take advantage of the public benefit. and those that are not directly abutting T3 are certainly within 500 feet of T3 if they're within the TOD area. And lastly, we have the Calmer TOD. Again, the city's intent is to very soon bring forward a rezoning of this area from T68L to T680. It's stark how underdeveloped it is, considering it has 150 units per acre and T68 zoning in place. It's the 5th least utilized metro rail station, and this entire area is developed to less than 5% of its overall development capacity. When you consider the proximity to transit, that this is walking distance to Civic Center, walking distance to the health district, this is a place that is sort of inexplicably underdeveloped. And we believe this proposed public benefit, combined with a large-scale rezoning of all the property from T68L to T680, will highly benefit this neighborhood. That said, planning staff recommends approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just do a check. Any members of the public wanting to speak?
I'm confirming right now, Chair. Just give me 1 second. I'm communicating with them at City Hall via text.
Okay. While we're waiting, who would like to be the first board member to have to speak or ask a question or proffer a motion? If not, I'm going to pick on Mr. Parrish.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to rely on staff's thoroughness and diligence in this because this affects so much of the city. And it's obviously in areas that are designated for higher development. But of course, we've got all these other issues that sometimes surface before us, like environmental, adaptability and all the neighborhood issues and all that. So I think we're going to pass this motion tonight unless we defer it to move this along based on a very thorough presentation, but it covers a lot of area.
I don't see anyone at the City Hall terminal, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And
Chair, can we dismiss the interpreters?
who were they? Yes, sure. Go ahead. Dismiss it.
Well, they were there in case there was somebody at the terminal, but there is no one at the terminal, so we're going to dismiss the interpreters.
Fair enough. All right, I'll turn it back to Mr. Parrish for a motion.
I move to approve.
So this is item number 5, right? Is there a second?
Yes, second.
I'm sorry, who was the motion?
Mr. Parrish, and the second was Mr. Alcalde?
Yes.
I call the roll, please.
And this was a motion to approve, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Member Parrish?
Yes.
Member Altabe?
Yes.
Member Collins?
Yes.
Member Dominguez?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Member Vidillo?
Yes.
Member Ziegler?
Yes.
Member Purasoff?
Yes.
Vice Chair Torrance?
Yes.
Chair Garvalia?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Chair, we do have 2 discussion items.
Go ahead with the first one.
The first item is, the purpose of the discussion is to discuss an additional PZAB meeting for the month of August or September.
Is the staff suggesting we should have one? Or
Joe?
do we
Certainly.
need
I'm gonna turn it over to Joe to speak.
So again, Joe Eisenberg, I mentioned three items that are in the same family. The third being that Calmer Station rezoning that fits in very nicely with the text amendment that you all just approved. Unfortunately, planning staff could not get that together in time to make it to this meeting or the 15th. That would be an ideal candidate to go on a special meeting in August, so that this item and the text amendment and the initial rezoning from D1 to T68 or T612 could travel to City Commission together.
Would that be the only item we would hear?
That's the item that I'm representing, but I would defer to the Chief of Land Development to see if that would fill out, if that would be a filled out agenda.
So there are a number. I believe we have approximately 3 items that are already ready to go to hearing. That's not counting items. There are some applicants who are actually ready for hearing, but because they're not comfortable with the virtual meeting forum, have decided to just wait in the queue. But at this moment, my understanding is, and I may need to verify my records, is that we have 3 to 4 items that are actually ready to move ahead.
Is there any board member who would be opposed to a meeting in August?
I would. I'm not going to be here in August, from August 1st to the 17th.
I was going to suggest, what if we did 3 meetings in July? July 1 today, July 15th scheduled, and July 29th.
The reason that we weren't looking towards the end of July was because of other meetings that were scheduled. We have UDRB, I believe, on the 29th. So there are other meetings that take up the last week of July. The date that we were looking more towards is August 5th, because that would be the first Wednesday in August 5th.
Fine with me.
I won't be here.
Do we need to direct you to do that, or just say, go ahead and schedule it?
The board can make a motion.
I'll
It
make a
would be
motion.
considered, it will be a special meeting.
I make a motion that we have a special meeting on August 5th.
To only hear the one item by Mr. Eisenberg, or any item that he puts forth?
Yeah, I would say any item. We didn't meet for such a long time. There's a backlog. We can knock off some things. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, what day?
August 5th, August 5, 2020.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Parrish. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
One opposed, Mr. Dominguez. Sorry, you won't be here.
You all very much.
Do you want, is there, you made a comment about September as well. Is there something going on in September we need to talk about?
No, this was just for a meeting, whether it was going to be in August or adding an additional meeting to September. But based on the comments from Mr. Eisenberg, the August date to address the Calmer projects.
Okay, we're good. Next discussion item, please.
And just so I'm clear, Chair, it's to address the Calmer project, and you said any other item that meets requirements to get onto an agenda, correct?
Correct.
The next discussion item is Miami 21 Task Force, and this was as a result of a discussion that was brought up at the June 17th meeting, and a memo was shared with all staff, with all board members earlier this evening.
No, we never got it.
Amber, that's the memo that you asked me to forward, correct?
Yes. So in the very beginning of the meeting, or right before the meeting had started, I believe Erica sent to each member a copy of the memo.
Oh, so it came out during the meeting?
Correct.
Yes. At the very beginning.
Maybe, can we read it? Can we read it into the, Mr. Chair, could we read it into the record then? The memo? I haven't seen it, so I'd like to hear it and have it read into the record.
And I printed it, but I haven't had time to read it because we've been dealing with all these other issues.
Yes, the memo was sent at 6:43 p.m.
Yeah, we were already involved in discussion on or listening to other issues. So maybe it should be read into the record.
Amber?
Would you like me to read it into the record? Chair?
Chair, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, please read it into the record.
Sure. It is roughly 3 pages long, so it might take a few minutes. The question that was presented was, what City of Miami body has the primary function and responsibility to review ordinance number 13114, the zoning ordinance of the City of Miami, Florida, as amended, referred to as the Miami 21 Code? Specifically, there was an inquiry as to whether the Miami 21 Report Ad Hoc Task Force, which is known as the Miami 21 Task Force, is to work with the Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board, report its findings and recommendations to PZAB, and for PZAB to then advise the City Commission. The discussion on this item was, several authorities have the function and responsibility to review the Miami 21 Code. 1.1.1 of the Miami 21 Code specifically identifies the zoning administrator, the planning director, the coordinated review committee, PZAB, and the City Commission as authorities that have a function to review the Miami 21 Code. In addition, the City Commission recently created the Miami 21 Task Force, which is an advisory task force that also has the function and responsibility to review the Miami 21 Code. Among several other responsibilities, the zoning administrator decides questions of zoning interpretation and interpretation of the Miami 21 Code pursuant to Section 7.1.2.3 of the Miami 21 Code. One of the planning director's responsibilities is to prepare recommendations regarding applications for amendments to the Miami 21 Code. Both the zoning administrator and the planning director serve in an advisory capacity to PZAB and the City Commission on zoning and Miami 21 Code matters, respectively. In addition to PZAB's functions to review requests for rezonings, special area plans, exceptions, variances, and appeals from certain administrative decisions, PZAB also serves as the local planning agency, which I'll refer to as the LPA. Pursuant to Section 163.3174 of the Florida statutes, and the Local Land Development Regulation Commission pursuant to Section 163.3194 subsection 2 of the Florida statutes. PZAB also has the function to prepare and recommend to the City Commission ordinances, regulations, and other proposals promoting orderly development of the city, to make or cause to be made necessary special studies on the location, adequacy, and conditions of specific facilities of the city, and to perform other functions given it by the City Commission. Among other duties related to the Miami 21 Code, including review of private applications and hearing appeals of PZAB decisions, the City Commission considers and acts upon proposed amendments to the Miami 21 Code after consideration of the recommendation by PZAB, and considers and adopts ordinances, regulations, and other proposals as it deems appropriate for promoting orderly development. In addition to those authorities specified in the Miami 21 Code, the recently created Miami 21 Task Force also has a function to review the Miami 21 Code to make recommendations to the City Commission in an advisory capacity. On December 12, 2019, the City Commission adopted Resolution number 19-0523, which directed the City Administration to perform a comprehensive review of the Miami 21 Code and provide the City Commission with a Miami 21 report, including recommendations. On January 23rd, 2020, the City Commission adopted Resolution number 20-0015, which created the Miami 21 Task Force to work with the city administration regarding recommendations on possible changes to the Miami 21 Code for the Miami 21 report. Pursuant to the resolution, the Miami 21 Task Force, through its chairperson, shall deliver its recommendations to the City Commission, the mayor, and the city manager. The Miami 21 Task Force meetings are open to the public, and public participation is encouraged. Once the recommendations are submitted, the Miami 21 Task Force automatically sunsets or terminates. Section 7.1.2.8, titled Amendment to Miami 21 Code, provides some additional insight as to the primary function and responsibility of review of the Miami 21 Code. Specifically, it states that every 2 years, the city may conduct a comprehensive review of the Miami 21 Atlas to evaluate the development direction of the city's neighborhoods and determine if additional amendments are appropriate. It also provides that amendments to the text of the Miami 21 Code, including tables and diagrams, may be made only upon application of a city official and may be considered at any time during the year. The planning director reviews each application for a code amendment and provides a recommendation and statement in regard to how each of the criteria are met or not met. PZAB shall, at a public hearing, give full consideration to the planning director's recommendations, evaluate an application for a code amendment, and make a recommendation based on whether the criteria are met. The City Commission shall then hold at least 2 advertised public hearings on the proposed code amendments. From a statutory standpoint, the City Commission is the body that has the function and responsibility to adopt the amendments to the Miami 21 Code. As the city's designated LPA, PZAB has the general responsibility for overseeing the city's comprehensive plan, including making recommendations to the City Commission regarding amendment of the city's comprehensive plan, as well as recommendations as to the consistency of proposed land development regulations and amendments thereto with the adopted comprehensive plan, when the LPA is serving as the Land Development Regulation Commission. No land development regulation or amendment thereto shall be adopted by the City Commission until such has been referred either to the LPA or to a separate Land Development Regulation Commission created pursuant to local ordinance, or to both, for review and recommendation as to the relationship of such proposal to the adopted comprehensive plan. Such recommendations regarding land development regulations or amendments thereto shall be made within a reasonable time, but no later than within 2 months after time of reference. If a recommendation is not made within the time provided, then the City Commission may act on the adoption. And so the conclusion is that, as described above, several different authorities play a role in the review of the Miami 21 Code. Not one body has the primary function and responsibility to review the Miami 21 Code, other than as described above. It should be noted that the City Commission is the only authority that can actually amend the Miami 21 Code, but other authorities can advise and recommend. Prohibition on the Miami 21 Task Force working with PZAB in its review and recommendations regarding the Miami 21 Code, but it is not required. Also, the enabling resolution specifically states that the Miami 21 Task Force shall deliver its recommendations to the City Commission, the mayor, and the city manager. While PZAB has the power to prepare and recommend ordinances, regulations, and other proposals promoting orderly development of the city to the City Commission, it is not exclusive. However, it should be noted that the Miami 21 Task Force is merely advisory and not a part of the amendment process. Before an amendment to the Miami 21 Code is adopted, PZAB must have the opportunity to review and make a recommendation on same through the process described herein and further described in the Florida statutes and the Miami 21 Code. Please note that this informal legal memorandum is limited to the facts contained herein and the request for legal counsel on the express question posed. It should not be construed as a general pronouncement and is subject to any further relevant laws, rules, regulations, or guidelines that may be enacted.
Thank you. Discussion on the discussion item.
I just want to thank Ms. Ketterer for doing that. I know she's got a full schedule no matter what. To dump that on her was a lot, and I really appreciate it. And after I've digested it, I may have some comments, but I've got to spend some time with it. My main concern was just that the PZAB be fully involved with which sections of Miami 21 even are suggested for review. Not all of them will be, obviously. And I was concerned that the task force would have its own, for want of a better word, agenda of what they pick and choose to review. And that would be the limit of our review. And I was afraid that we would be bypassed altogether and they go directly to the commission, which they have the right to do, but apparently it will at some point come back to us. I still have that concern, however, and I'm going to be looking at this carefully, and I have to review your memo. But once again, thank you, Amber, for doing that. That's a very good job. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I actually enjoyed the exercise. It was a little bit time consuming, but I very much enjoyed the exercise, and I wish I could have gotten it to you a little bit earlier. I apologize for sending it to you at the beginning. I wanted to do a thorough job, and I wanted some of my colleagues to review it as well. But I want to reiterate that it's not bypassing PZAB. The recommendations will be submitted to City Commission, and should they wish to act upon them, it still needs to go through the whole process of adoption, which specifically includes and requires this board's review, as described in that memo.
Mr. Eisenberg?
So Amber Ketterer is the assigned staff attorney to the Miami 21 Task Force, and I'm the planning department's assigned liaison. So we're pretty heavily engaged in that. And I know it's the intent of our elected officials to have as broad a participation as possible in that task force. We want every member of the public who has some knowledge or concerns about the zoning ordinance to be giving comments. I'd like to put on the record now the email address to do that is miami21@miamigov.com. If you have any broad feedback about the zoning ordinance, please send your comments, concerns, proposed changes, all that stuff to miami21@miamigov.org. I think it's also incumbent upon you all to give your feedback as you see fit, maybe even potentially designating a PZAB board member to sort of track it or to be engaged with it as an individual. And you could sort of be the in-between between the Miami 21 Task Force and PZAB, reporting back and forth, having one inform the other. I think that might be something that you could try, assuming there's no conflict, that Amber sees contributing to the task force and then ultimately resolving to do something with their work.
Right, and I think it might be an idea if the resolutions weren't provided to you, we can send those resolutions that directed the city administration to create the report. And in that resolution are numerous topics that the city commission wanted this task force to focus on when reviewing Miami 21. They're the hot topics, so that might be helpful. And if this board is interested in doing a workshop on a topic, that's permissible, because there is some overlap with, this board is able to make recommendations and propose regulations. So I'll send that resolution to Erica and she can provide that to you so you can see the topics.
Thank you. All right, next, I want to just follow back up with Mr. Ziegler's comment about the alleys. I asked him to pause while we went through the agenda. And Mr. Eisenberg, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm just waving goodbye. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for contemplating that special meeting. I genuinely appreciate it.
Okay, good night.
All right.
So back to Mr. Ziegler. I'll give you the floor to talk about your concern about alleys.
Well, basically, it's a simple thing. I was just trying to piggyback on. Well, since we're not going to have a resolution, they've done some preliminary work on the other issue. Just to put it, the easiest way I can put it is sort of like what I said. You know, you have alleyways, and from time to time, developers are requesting that city vacate those alleyways. All I'm saying is, you know, especially on Biscayne Boulevard, those alleyways or those right-of-ways have value. And the city needs to put some kind of determination as far as, not necessarily an exact determination, but I mean, we can come from a standpoint of saying, listen, the property is worth X number of dollars now, separated or chipped up the way it is, especially the one we had last week. Now, putting that together, what's the value now? That's all I'm saying. That has value. I mean, what the city wants to do with that, you know, again, you know, it'll be entirely up to them. But I don't see from a business standpoint, they're basically just giving it to them, saying, listen, I know you want to consolidate. I know you want to basically unify your property, but we have rights running through here. And that rights, those rights have value, has a value. That's all I'm saying. Those rights have a value. We've given, you know, without having those rights, he wouldn't be able to do that. The property owner would not be able to assemble that property and do what he wants to do with those easements running through there. And that's all I'm saying. The city needs to put some kind of determination or value on that and say, listen, okay, no problem. If we're going to do this, this is what this is going to want in dollar amount, or this is what you're going to do for the city in return. For this value, you're going to do that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying exactly what to do, but determine there is a value there. That's basically my thing is. And the city needs to really make a determination, especially on Biscayne Boulevard. I mean, it's a lot of value running through there because everybody's going to want it. Once they do this, Crescent Heights, somebody else is going to do the same thing. That's all I'm saying. We need to determine some kind of value that wherever those alleyways are in those heavy commercial corridors like that. Second Avenue, the same thing. You know, you got a lot of roadways there that can basically has value to property owners, assemblers, and whatever they want to do. I'm saying they shouldn't just give that away. That's all I'm saying. If they want to, fine. But I'm just saying, I don't think from a prudent business standpoint, that's the way we should go. Especially now with the budget that's going to be coming up in October, all these shortfalls, it's going to be a lot of problems that things can be addressed than just giving it away. So that's my spiel.
All right, Madam Attorney, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Ziegler, you have very, very valid and good points. However, I do want you guys to keep in mind that one, the city doesn't own these right-of-ways. They were dedicated by subdividers as either private alleys, public alleys, streets, etc. So we don't own them. So we can't get compensation for them. We can't sell them because we hold them in trust for the public. We do have a fee. I believe it's per square footage of the amount of right of way that you are closing. Maybe we can review those fees. I don't recall what the fee is per square footage. But you know, maybe we could review that fee to see whether it's enough or not. And there is also specific criteria that the code provides for. Mostly, is it in the public interest to close these alleys? Some of them have been abandoned. Some of them are dangerous. I also know that Ms. Ellis suggested to have Public Works here because they are the experts in this area and can probably explain a little bit more about why we would want to vacate these alleys. But I just wanted you guys to keep in mind that we don't actually own these alleys. We hold them in trust, so we can't sell them.
No, I understood that basically you have the right of way to. But you know, and throwing that same thing out to you, I'm just saying, let's look at last week or 2 weeks ago what we had. You know, they're going to be able to basically assemble this property. How many more millions of dollars you added to that by vacating those alleyways? I mean, you hold it the public's trust? I mean, is it in the public's trust to give these guys $1 million, whatever it is, the value? And it may be, because they're going to do this. I'm not saying, but it has a value. It's not just a matter that yeah, you don't own it, but you have the rights. It's almost the same thing. It's almost like someone telling me, listen, I'll buy your building, but give me a 100-year lease. You basically accomplish the same thing, which is basically the city have the right to do this in the perpetuity or whenever they end. So the idea that it's not a quote ownership, but you have the right to control it, it's basically the same thing. You've accomplished the same thing. It's no material difference as far as what somebody, if it was going to go in a marketplace, what somebody's going to pay for that. You're going to pay the same thing for a 100-year lease than if you bought the property. It's almost going to be the same value. That's all I'm saying. That has a value. And to those guys specifically, it has a tremendous value for what they want to do.
Right.
Vice Chair, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I think that Mr. Ziegler really covered it really clearly, and I agree with him. It's always bothered me somewhat when we've given these alleys up for nothing. So maybe whatever fees there are, maybe that's a way of getting something back.
Mr. Parrish?
I certainly agree with Board Member Ziegler as well, that especially in the case that we had before us, the Crescent Heights case, those rights, whatever they are, were extremely valuable to that Crescent Heights group. So if they're held in public trust, there should be a mechanism that the city establishes. Some alleys, and I think Aaron would probably agree, just need to be closed because they're a public nuisance. The case on Biscayne Boulevard was not that case. So I think they have to be looked at individually every time these alley closures come up, not en masse. And they have to be reviewed by a committee that evaluates what those rights are worth once an assemblage is completed. And there has to be a mechanism for assigning a value to that the public trust can be used for affordable housing or anything. But it's not an easy legal matter for sure, but I think it's one that can be solved. And after all, they're coming to us. The applicants are always coming to us, unless it's the city saying we want these right alleys closed. The applicant is coming to us and say, please close these alleys. We don't have to allow that to happen unless there's some legal compulsion to do that. So there is a value to that, to saying, yes, we'll allow that, but you have to pay into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or you have to contribute to a park or whatever. It's extortion, but for the public good.
Mr. Altabe?
Legal extortion.
Yes.
Well, I think everybody knows what I think. Closing the alleys is not just something isolated. It's always the first step to something. And when you don't like the entirety, well, you don't need to approve the closing of alleys until that entirety is acceptable. I'm not saying I disagree when, okay, you had to pay for something that you own already. You don't have to pay because it also the fees based on square footage are minimal. And we're talking about a huge development. And if the entirety is not acceptable, when do you stop them? So you need to close the alleys, otherwise your project doesn't go through, right? Okay, what are you ready to do in exchange for us approving your closure of the alleys? Because this is not isolated. This is not we close the alleys because you decided one day that alleys that were there for 50 years, all of a sudden, is impractical. No, it's impractical because it's obstructing your purpose of a much larger project. So I guess you're going to have to do something in exchange for that. That's the general idea that we all have. And like Mr. Ziegler said, that's all I have to say.
Me too.
All right, so maybe we could hear a little bit more at some point from Public Works, maybe what that fee is, how it's calculated. Maybe that's a Miami 21 task force recommendation that goes to them or something we decide to move forward. But I think we need to get a little bit more facts about the current process and those fees, and maybe that's an angle we can pursue in the future.
I mean, like I said, if you want, I mean, I'll get a few appraisals myself. I'll go there and just do it. Give me the value of, just take Biscayne Boulevard. Just take those alleyways. Just say, hey, let's give an idea. This is what it's worth as it is, and this is what it's worth if someone is able to assemble it. I mean, you have an idea of value. That's all.
All right.
Just
So, Ms. Ellis, were you going to say anything about Public Works, or was that Madam Attorney?
No.
I don't know. Was Public Works here at this meeting?
Tonight's meeting or at the previous meeting?
No, there was a mention about what the fee was for Public Works.
So while it is the planning department who presents the request for closures, the city code, I believe it's chapter 55, is where we actually look at Public Works and the requirements for a closure. So my recommendation is, if you want to have a discussion, it would be best served by having a representative by Public Works in attendance.
I did, Mr. Chair, I did look at a long time ago at that chapter about what's involved with Public Works. It has like 10 determinations of whether it's being used and a whole bunch of things that do not have to do with what Aaron is talking about, which is the value to an assemblage of removing those alleys. So Public Works needs to be directed to actually focus on what value their requirements for closing an alley does not touch upon. And it's the value of the assemblage that Aaron's talking about.
Yeah, it's.
So can we get Public Works as a discussion item in an upcoming meeting and ask them to review this meeting's closing comments from the board, and so that they're prepared to address the concerns and the comments made by the board at this this kind of last discussion.
Can we find out what the fees are for?
Yes,
what
that'll be part of what Public Works, and maybe you could send that off to the board members in advance.
That'd be great.
So would you like this item in September 2nd, September 16th?
Sure. First meeting in September.
Yeah. Well, we can have it before we have that next meeting with Crescent Heights. I mean, that'd be some valuable information to have prior to that.
We will not entertain any further alley closures until this discussion item happens. So don't put any of those on the agenda.
No alley closures on the agenda until a discussion with Public Works?
Yes, until that discussion item has happened.
Okay.
Anything further to come before the board? Is there a motion to adjourn?
You said September 2nd, correct? First meeting in September?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, there's no other items on the agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Happy 4th of July. Thank you all for attending. Good night.
Nice seeing everybody.
Good night.
Night.
One more time. And now for the 2 hair ties or rubber bands. Place 1 rubber band on one side and the other on the other side. fold either side